Hey guys, enter the stars. And sometimes I wake up in the morning and wonder if any of this is real. This is a new ley line, the 244th ley line, at a 244 degree bearing. What we have is the JFK assassination. Now I want you to focus on this red line on your screen. JFK assassination. The MLK assassination. Just miles away from the red line. Just across the river. The Lincoln assassination. Just miles from the red line. And finally, Obama's birthplace. In Hawaii, Kenya. The 244th ley line. Take care and be safe, you guys. Hey guys, enter the stars. And sometimes I wake up in the morning and wonder if any of this is real. This is a new ley line, the 244th ley line, at a 244. Good morning, everybody. Enter the stars. So for those of you that made it to the premiere last night, you heard it straight from the horse's mouth. Make this country great. And this was in this vamp movie, we're going to call it Abe Lincoln Vamp Hunter. This is it right here. We saw masks, lots and lots of masks, face coverings, whatever you want to call it. You can say what you want about this. Oh, that they were robbers and this and that, but really they weren't. In this particular scene, this was a band of vamps operating out during the daylight, and there was really no particular reason why they had masks on. They weren't robbing anybody. They were there to take this woman. So they were out of context. Well, now we know the context. And then we came to the conclusion that vamp bites are probably a metaphor for VCs. Now, Trump called himself the snake. And even if he doesn't force these VCs on us, the governors will. They've already proven that they do what they want, that they do not listen to the president when it comes to mandates. So why would it be any different? If Trump didn't intervene in the mask mandates, why would he intervene for the VC mandates? And I believe Biden is just a play on the word biting. See how the spiritual world manifests when you really think about and dig into what all this means as it's playing out? Now, I'm going to show you last night's montage later on in the show this morning, but we've got some other things to cover. So, how did we end up on the Abe Lincoln Vamp Hunter trail? Well, we had discovered that the Stephen King It franchise and the Pennywise clown had some clues in it. And we determined that Abe Lincoln was 1 year old when the first Pennywise clown emerged. Now, according to the legend that Stephen King illustrated here. Pennywise basically originated from some kind of a meteor that hit the Derry, Maine area, was buried under the ground, and inside that meteor is evil. Now, if you really want to think about what that metaphor is, it's probably a metaphor for the fallen ones. I mean, what else could it be, right? Something from outside coming down in here, and basically every 27 years carrying out, we're going to call it Janus sides, right? And so this is what's happening. So all we did was extrapolate backwards. It says right here in the It franchise, in the fandom here, 1864, 120 people, 50 children, 70 adults. There's the number 57 again, which stands for 5G whiz. And you extrapolate backwards 27 years. That brings you to 1837. And then you go back another 27 years, and that brings you to 1810. And Lincoln, the one penny president, was 1 year old. Now, we can't just stop there, because if our investigation is correct, there should have been some type of mass sacrifice that happened in the area in 1810. Was there? There absolutely was. It was called the Yahoo Falls. You could read the screen there. And this occurred in 1810 when Lincoln was 1 year old, just miles away from where he grew up. Now, this was the Cherokee Indian tribe. These women and children were at this falls. They were cornered, pinned in, and taken down. So, how does this all fit into the Lincoln story? Well, if you look at the area of Yahoo Falls, it is right smack dab in the middle of Lincoln Territory in southern Kentucky, northern Tennessee. These were Lincoln and his father's stomping grounds. Now, it doesn't stop there, because according to history, Lincoln's paternal grandparents, his namesake Captain Abraham Lincoln and his wife Bathsheba, moved to the family from Virginia to Jefferson County, Kentucky. Captain was taken out in an Indian raid. His children, including 8-year-old Thomas, which was Lincoln's father, witnessed the attack. Do you see how all of this seems to dovetail in together? Now, the question becomes, was Lincoln the first Pennywise it clown? When you look at the timeline and how all this dovetails together, you got visual similarities as well with the crazy hair and the little Elvis thing going on in the top. And you consider the fact that they made these movies about Lincoln being a vamp. Actually wasn't a vamp, but at the end of this, and you're going to see in the montage that I put together, he says it's not just vamps who live forever. He was basically calling himself a time traveler. And now you're seeing how all this begins to fit in together. Now, Lincoln was only 56 years old when he left this earth. But the weird thing is everybody agrees that Lincoln looked way older than 56. He looked like he was in his 80s in some of the images, the last images that we have. Now, during Lincoln's life, there was a lot of bloodletting going on. It was a Civil War, Native American, Janus sides, all centered around the birth of Lincoln. They say 750,000 men perished. And this is where the plot thickens, because we identified the floating that Pennywise would always talk about. That's the helium in the balloons, and Pennywise would grab this bunch of balloons and float around, right, to terrify these children. And we found out that helium comes from Helios, the sun god, which also syncretizes with Dionysus. And then we also found out that helium is mined here in the United States. We have the most helium in the entire world. And that when it's mined from decomposed dead. And that it is often found almost exclusively with methane, which is also a decomposition gas. So, Pennywise floating on these balloons was much like David Blaine and his little floating on balloons in his latest stunt that he did. And he cited the French film Red Balloon as his inspiration. I believe what they're really telling us here is that these balloons, they mean a lot of things because there's a lot of nested truths in what the red balloon represents. But one of those meanings are the spirits of children. And the red is the color of death, of course. And there is something going on with the BLOOD. Now, in a strange twist, Tom Hanks is actually related to Abraham Lincoln. I mean, the synchronicities just go off the rails. Now, her name was Nancy Hanks. So they have the same last name, even. Now, I don't know if he changed his name. I don't know what went down with this. But here it is right here. They admit it. Now, when you consider the fact that Hanks was one of the first people to offer his plasma to help develop a cure for CV-19, now you have something very weird and creepy. I believe that Hanks is the latest Pennywise archetype. Abe Lincoln. Now, I broke down this film, Abe Lincoln Vamp Hunter, and believe it or not, it released 4 days after Trump's birthday, 4 years before he would become president. There it is right there. This was a Tim Burton film. 4 days before or after Trump's birthday, 4 years before he would become president in 2016. Now I want you to listen and watch this montage. We just uploaded this last night in case you missed it. You'll catch it this time. And see what they had to say. Now listen carefully and I'll pause this as well.
This war has cost us countless lives, not to mention millions of dollars. I thought we were going to make this country great. This war has cost us countless lives, not to mention millions of dollars. I thought we were going to make this country great.
Make this country great. Make this country great.
Not tear it apart.
This is the only way we can save the country now, Speed.
Good afternoon, sir. Joshua Speed at your service. Abraham. Well, a friend in need is a friend of speed. Friend of speed. Friend of speed.
Now, this shop owner hires Abe Lincoln, and this is how the storyline goes in this film. It's basically a rewriting of history. And basically, Abe Lincoln is up against this tribe of vamps who basically want to infect all of the United States and take it over. Does this all sound familiar? And Abe Lincoln is kind of struggling and battling with what is he going to do about this? Is he going to be part of this fight or is he not? He kind of gets drawn into it because his mother gets taken out by these vamps. And so he wants revenge. Okay. I think they killed his dad too. So basically Abe Lincoln becomes like a professional fighter, right? And he practices and taps into something that is supernatural in the way that he moves and the speed that he moves. Now, they don't talk about a bloodline and Lincoln being part of a bloodline specifically, but there's something inside of him that this other vamp who turned against the evil vamps, he sees something in Abe and he recruits him. And that vamp turned on his own. And so it almost infers that Abe Lincoln is also one of them, or at least has another method of trumping time. Now, as I was watching this, I got chills because Abe Lincoln has these skills with the axe, and they can't kill him, even though he's going up against these supernatural evil vamps. So this is all starting to make sense. This was back in 2012. Now, Speed is the store owner, and he hires Abraham Lincoln, and eventually Lincoln tells Speed about what is really going on and what he really does at night. He hunts these vamps. Speed becomes his assistant. And when I heard his name being repeated over and over again in the film, I was like, I've heard that before. Warp Speed. Now, look at the dual needles on this spaceship in this 1981 film called Warp Speed. And we're going to get into that later in the show too. And some of the proposed technologies to deliver the VC, they look like snake fangs, snake bites. And in fact, in this particular movie from 1981 called Warp Speed, they use this snake bite mechanism and they stick it in her neck. And remember the first time we decoded this and I told you guys, I said, you guys, this has a very vamp feel to it. There's something about the vamps. And I said that. This was months ago, before I even looked at Abraham Lincoln in the Vamp Hunter film. And I think I was right. Because this whole thing about injecting us in the neck with these needles, and you need 2 doses, or there's multiple micro needles. It all fits in with this archetype of being bitten by a vamp. There's the device there in the film. There's 2 little needles. They go right into her neck.
Friend of Speed. What can I get for you? I don't suppose you know of any rooms for rent, Mr. Speed.
Scottish Highland pistol, Scottish Highland pistol, Scottish Highland pistol.
Now, again, I got chills as I was decoding this because we just talked about the Scottish Highlands when we did the video on Samhain, and we pulled clips from the series called Outlander. In the opening episode of Outlander, season 1, episode 1, they come into this little town and they see that the people in the town are celebrating Samhain. They've got the doors and posts and lintels marked with the blood from sacrificed animals. And then they go in to the shop owner and she starts explaining to them that it's the festival of Samhain. And then the guy says something about the Scottish Highlands. In that video, we showed you the prophecy of Trump in the Scottish Highlands. That the film Highlander was all about Trump. And Outlander and the traveling time stones that Claire would go through. She would go through these stones, the standing stones, and pass through time. So then, lo and behold, they mention the Scottish Highlands. Of all the places in the world.
And if 1 barrel's not enough, 7 should do you.
He said if 1 barrel isn't enough, 7 should do you. And here's the scene that shows all the guys in masks. Now, why are all these guys wearing masks? They're all vamps. Now, later in the film, just continuity, right? because people are going to just write this off. This is why I have to be very specific with how I present these things to you guys, because it's very easy just to write this stuff off as you're just reading things and you're crazy. No, here they are in broad daylight. Well, later they have a big battle, the Battle of Gettysburg, later in the film. And nobody's wearing a mask there. As the vamps attack them, they end up having to smuggle silver in to put as the cannonballs and the bullets to help win the war in this retelling of history. But so you got vamps here they're all wearing masks, but during the battle they're not wearing masks. So they don't just wear masks during the day. They're wearing them for a reason, because it's foreshadowing of what we're all experiencing right now. Now, that guy you just saw, this is his wife or his girlfriend, and they kill her, right? And they turn him into a vamp. And he's the one that trains Abe Lincoln to fight these guys because they killed his wife, right? Even though he's a vamp.
I've seen Jews build Egypt, boy.
Now, vamps need BLOOD, of course, which is what they may be trying to force us to inject into our bodies as a cure. That's the bottom line of where all this is headed. And I believe that this is what we could become if we take it. And all of these zombie and vamp films are really depicting us turned after we accept the blue BLOOD. Now, in this part, he talks about his time on Earth and that he's been around for all these millennia, right? And he saw the pyramids being built by the ancient Hebrews. And the reason why I put this part of the clip in the montage is because if you look here, you will see the Egyptian pharaoh depicted as giants. I've been trying to tell you guys this for 4 years. The ancient Egyptian pharaohs were Nephilim. They were from the tribe of Mithraism. Mithraism is translated to the word Egypt. It's the very first time in the Bible that the word Egypt is mentioned. Mithraism. And it is the son of Ham. And Mithraism was father to, I believe, Cush, or maybe that was his brother. Cush was the father of Nimrod. Nimrod also had great stature. So somehow this Nephilim bloodline survived through Ham and Mithraism, or Egypt. And these were the first pharaohs. If you look back in time, one of the very first pharaohs, his name sounds like Mithraism. Let's keep watching.
The demon of slavery is tearing our country apart. We must stand up. We must stand strong.
I thought we were going to make this country great.
And fight for the very soul of our nation.
Now, what's interesting about this are the themes.
Until every man is
free, no man is free. So, obviously, this is the opposite of what's happening right now in our country, right? And they're playing these sides. And they like to do this. They like to jump back and forth between issues and the conflicts, back and forth on these squares of the checkerboard. Almost look at it as like, okay, so on one side of the checkerboard or the chessboard, you've got all the black pawns, and on the other side, you've got all the white pawns. And the black pawns are supposed to stay on the black squares, and the white pawns are supposed to stay on the white squares. Well, what they like to do to confuse and confound and create more chaos is they like to jump from the black square to the white square. So, in essence, they're changing sides. They're pretending to change sides. like a chameleon. And then that confuses us, and so that we cannot find out exactly what's going on and how these people operate. So that's kind of what's going on here. So Abe Lincoln is depicted as someone who's defending all of this, and this is exactly what Lincoln did. He pretended to want people to be free, but then if you read his comments and what he talked about and how he described black people, of course, then you'll understand that he really didn't believe that blacks were equal. He just really didn't. And in the rewriting of history, which again, there's another clue. We're watching a rewriting of history. Okay? A fictional retelling. They're basically giving you a clue that, in fact, history was retold. And many people believe that he just made up this issue, which is what we see happening. He made up this issue to get the blacks to fight with him against the South, who was basically trying to be free from the federal government. The issue of slavery was only a small part of all of this. And I'm telling you this as a black man. Okay? Everything else we experienced has been pushed down from the top and created. All this fear was created by these people through newspaper. Back then, they were the ones depicting all these things the way they did. If you drill down to the level, and I'm not trying to minimize slavery, it happened. That's not what I'm trying to say here. What I'm trying to tell you guys is that they created the slave matrix. They're the ones that reinforced it. They gave it financial incentive. The people at the top, and they wanted to control that and tax it. A lot of people in the North had slaves. Many presidents had slaves. And what this really comes down to is how we treat each other as human beings. And no doubt there were some bad actors in the South. Very bad actors. But to say that Lincoln was the one who ended all of this, ended slavery, and that we're supposed to be grateful for him, go back and read Lincoln's comments about black people. They weren't even considered a whole person. So how can you believe someone's equal if you don't even believe they're a whole person? Double speak. Kind of like the double speak we get now from both sides of the aisle. From Biden and Trump. And any leader that they put forward. So, we've got the same themes in this 2012 film of equal rights and all this. And now it's happening again. It's like we're in some kind of time warp. Now, the entire theme of this film is set in Little Egypt. So that dovetails in with the scene you just saw of the pharaoh cracking the whip. This is Little Egypt, southern Illinois, and that's where this takes place. Unbelievable. Against this backdrop of equal rights. Now, we had covered Little Egypt. We had discovered that this was much like the real Egypt. We had a viral video that we uploaded probably a couple years ago where these eclipses crossed. I think Makanda, Illinois is in this area, where the two great American eclipses cross each other in this one spot. And we overlaid the Nile Delta over this place and showed you how the Mississippi River is a metaphor for Egypt and the Nile. And the Nile Delta. Except it's all in reverse. So, in the Egyptian Delta, the water is flowing up. But in our Delta, it's flowing down. It's all opposites. So we, in essence, live in a polar opposite of Egypt here in America. Little Egypt. Now, and you can find that video, I think, on this channel or my Reloaded channel. And just look up the top viewed videos, and it should be in the first 20 videos that pop up. Now, what battle is raging right now in America? Stoked from the top down to ignite civil unrest. It's happening right now, you guys. So, I'm starting to wonder, is the prick, the VC prick, what do they call it? They call it a jab, a prick. I'm wondering if this is the bite of the vampire.
We are all slaves.
Abraham, let me make you immortal. Let us fight through the ages side by side.
Vampires are not the only things that live forever.
So there you heard it. Vampires are not the only things that live forever. Now, I want you to check out some of this novel microneedle technology. Now, this is what they're proposing as a delivery mechanism for the VC. Now, other channels have covered this. I didn't discover this, so I don't want to take credit for this, but look at this. They look like fangs. And some of these are called, one of them is called Pitkovac. You know what a pit is? Yeah, it was discovered in Pittsburgh, and Pitkovac is short for Pittsburgh, but a pit is a viper. A pit is a viper. You knew I was a snake when you let me in. This is the infrared quantum dot. They want to have this dye under your skin. That would be called a mark. Stores the data in a pattern of near-infrared dye, which is delivered under the skin at the same time as the VC. This is from BioOptics World. What else do we have here? Pitkovac. Unbelievable. Like a pit viper. A snake. These little micro needles that they want to put inside of us. I don't want to be bitten. Notice that the vamp bite also syncretizes or is a metaphor for infection. That's not an accident. Now, many people remember back when this whole CV-19 started that they thought that snakes were the original source. Did they not? And now all this begins to make sense. This was dated January 2020. They were talking about this. Now they have since retracted this, and they're saying it's from bats. But isn't it interesting that they chose a snake of all creatures? Wow. All right, you guys. So where's all this headed? Well, here's the latest news. AstraZeneca had to put the trial on hold because some guy fell out. Don't know what happened to him. Severe adverse reaction. They're trying to say that we can't confirm that he got heart.
Community. Tonight we're reporting one.
Let me go into the chat. A lot of it we had to pull down off of the channel. Enter the stars. Good morning. And what you're going to see next are clips from a series called Raised by Wolves. Now, this series is right up there at the top of #1 series this year. And it's all about mother and father androids raising children. Later on in the series, the woman android actually begins to give birth to a child that is half artificial intelligence and android and half human. Watch.
The future of humanity is growing inside you.
And that one's Sol Invictus. These remind me of the old tarot cards back on Earth.
Used by the devil cults before we purged their ranks.
Quiet. Are you feeding on him?
No, my fetuses.
What's wrong with your stomach, Mother?
Would you like to say hello to number 7? Soon.
You had another frozen embryo.
No. This is my own fetus. No. Father didn't help. I made it myself.
How did you do that?
That is beyond my understanding.
Hello?
Mother.
What is this? Come on. Sol put that baby inside Mother. I can just feel it. And this baby is going to change everything.
Now, this is where things get interesting, because Raised by Wolves is all about the Luper cult, Lupercalia. And this will dovetail into the rest of today's show, because Abraham Lincoln was born on Lupercalia, February 13th. Now, the way the story goes is the android used to have white blood as her, basically to power her. And that would be like the milk. And then she starts needing human BLOOD. So there you have exactly what the Luper cult used to do during Lupercalia. They would sacrifice a dog or a goat. They would take milk, they would mix it with BLOOD, they would soak wool in it, and that would make the color pink. So this android with the copper colored hair, which is all part of this as well, it's the blue bloods, is basically showing us the Luper cult, the mixing of the two bloodlines through technology and these androids. Let that sink in for a second. The Luper cult in full display. White and red make pink. And this is why Valentine's Day has the pink theme. And that's why it falls on Lupercalia. All of these ancient pagan practices were syncretized with our reality. And so, in essence, they drag us into their false god worship. Now, today we're going to be examining the Abraham Lincoln $5 matrix. And in previous videos, we looked at how Lincoln syncretized with his penny and Pennywise the clown, Stephen King's It Clown, and we matched up Lincoln's birth year with the first killings that happened by the It entity in Stephen King's It. All we did was go back, I think it was every 27 years. We went back before the first reported killing, and that landed on basically Lincoln was 1 year old, the one penny president. And there were many, many more connections that we found, but that's the tip of the iceberg for that. But now we're finding this connection to the $5 bill. Now, the newest version of the $5 bill was released in a ceremony on March 13th, 2008. And that was the 12-year pre-anniversary of Trump's emergency declaration that changed America forever. Friday the 13th of March, 2020, is when Trump made the announcement at 3:30 p.m. And we get more clues with this educational series of the $5 bill. This was before Lincoln was put on the $5 bill. Here's the image here. And this was in 1896. Now we're going to zoom in on this and break all of this down and look at some of the elements of this $5 bill from 1896. Again, this is called the Educational Series. And here you'll see that this was basically, let's see here, let's zoom in on this. I want you guys to get a very good image of what is being depicted here. Now, 1896 was a decade after the Statue of Liberty was erected, and the woman holding this light bulb is clearly channeling Lady Liberty. A decade apart, this is what they were depicting, and Liberty was originally dedicated and reopened in 2012. That's when they reopened it after some construction. Obviously, they were pointing back to the original dedication date of October 28th. What's so important about October 28th? Well, this was the ancient Roman battle at Milvian Bridge that happened 1,500 years earlier on this exact same date. Here it is, right here. What happened at this ancient Roman battle? Well, this is the famed battle in which Constantine allegedly won the battle by painting a cross on the shields of his warriors. And afterwards, instead of giving the glory to Christ, guess what he did? It's right here in the article, and I'll link all this in the pinned comments. He allowed the pagans to attribute the victory to Sol Invictus. I want you to see this with your own eyes, because this is the missing link to the Statue of Liberty, SOL, and Sol Invictus. The very date of the statue's opening, October 28th, was on the anniversary of this ancient battle in which the pagans gave their praise to Sol Invictus instead of Jesus Christ. Now, history rewrites, and they try to say that Constantine was this great emperor who was a Christian, but in this act, he already denied Jesus. You can't make this up, you guys. Now, when we look at how the Statue of Liberty came together, you will notice in this article all kinds of references to copper. In fact, copper is mentioned 30 times surrounding the building of the Statue of Liberty. And it was the skin of the Statue of Liberty, like the copper snake, the copper serpent, going all the way back to the Old Testament of the Bible. And now you see how the copper penny and Lincoln tie all back to this. Now let's get back to this old $5 bill, because this will help you understand the true roots of America, which is Mithraism. And that series that we just saw, Raised by Wolves, is all about Mithraism. They say it. That's the religion they worship. And you just heard the little girl say Sol Invictus, which links right into Mithraism. We are the nation of fake Christians. Fake Christianity founded America. We call ourselves Christians, but nothing that we do is what Christ taught. We wage battles out of preemption because we're scared. We take out children in the womb. 58 million since 1973. We worship pagan holidays right out of the church. And it all goes back to Constantine, who co-opted Christianity way back then. And under that banner, he basically began a legacy of basically waging battle on all kinds of different peoples. And then now here we get down to modern America. And it's real easy for the devil to discredit Christianity because he just says, look at all the people that died under Christianity. See how that works? And it's all because the devil already co-opted Christianity a long time ago. And this is why you have to be a Christian outside of the religious paradigm. Now let's keep going with this because I researched this $5 bill in depth. To her right was what you're looking at right here. Pre-prepared to have your mind blown. You might want to be sitting down for this. Is Jupiter, whose father is Saturn. Jupiter is Zeus in the Greek mythology. And Zeus's son is Apollo. So, you have Sol Invictus in the middle, represented by Lady Liberty. You've got next to her Apollo, or his father Zeus, right on the $5 bill. Now, there's more. Next is called fame, and I researched all this. I'm not going to belabor you reading this from the sources that I got, but this is what it is. And if you have doubts, you go look up this bill yourself. This down here at her feet is called fame, with the trumpet. They call it a trumpet. It's not a horn. They call it a trumpet, like Trump. And according to the myth, well, the description they give for the bill is that she is delivering sweet music over the map of the United States. Kind of like a Pied Piper, right? Well, who is fame? This is her right here. Fame. There's her trumpet, also known as Asa, the personification of fame and renown. Her favor being notability, her wrath being scandalous rumors. She was the daughter of either Gaia or Elpis. Was described as she who initiates and furthers communication, and had an altar at Athens. A tremendous gossip, Feme was said to have pried into the affairs of mortals and gods, then repeated what she learned, starting off at first with just a dull whisper, but repeating it louder each time until everyone knew. So in effect, she is the goddess of blackmail. After all, how else can you control politicians and America? Now, of course, years later, in 1914, Lincoln would grace the $5 bill, but this that we just decoded is very telling because Trump and Pence love to invoke Lincoln. I mean, look at these headlines here about how many times they've invoked Abraham Lincoln just in the past week. This was yesterday. Trump says, I love the black community. He brings up Abraham Lincoln when asked about the Breonna Taylor case. Here's another, yesterday, The Hill. History professor, Democrats should work around SCOTUS like Abe Lincoln did. And this goes on and on in these debates that happened. 1858. Douglas. There's your 58 again, linked directly into Trump. 58 stories in Trump Tower. The 1958 Western about a man named Trump who was going to build a wall. The 1958, which is when Biff won his millions at 21 years old. I think 1858 was when, wasn't that when Baron Trump came out with that book? We also have 58 rooms at Mar-a-Lago. Trump's on 57th Street, which is 5G whiz. The 58s are very, very deep in this. So, this is all going on. We had Pence sneaking away to Lincoln's boyhood home. Pence is from Indiana, which is where Lincoln grew up until he was 21. He was in Indiana. These are undeniable connections. Now, after he passed away, right? These are the things that were found in his pockets. And there was a $5 bill that they found in his pocket, but it wasn't a Union $5 bill. It was a Confederate $5 bill. This is it right here. So Lincoln had a fascination with this bill. Who knows why it was in there? I can tell you why I think it was in there. Because even back then, I believe the right-left paradigm was in effect. And these both sides were working together to build America. Creating the division, creating the fighting, creating the sacrifice that would be necessary to forge their new world order, going all the way back to Lincoln and before. Now, Lincoln talked to the dead. His wife was an occultist. And there is at least one known example of a seance that Lincoln attended. His wife held seances regularly right there in the White House. Look at the height of Abraham Lincoln. Trump is 6'3", Lincoln 6'4". I think Trump is the second tallest president under Lincoln. Lincoln was the tallest. They revealed the contents of Lincoln's pockets on Lupercalia, February 12th, 1976. The anniversary of his birthday, obviously. Now, let's keep going with this because it goes even more nuts. Lincoln appears in I, Pet Goat 2 as the evil $5 serpentine monitor. And there you could see right there at the edge of his face the number 5 written out in letters. You see the chin line here, the beard line of Lincoln. He's got serpentine skin. And let's get into a little bit closer look at Lincoln. Here's the history of Lincoln and the seances in the White House. I'm not going to belabor this or get into depth about this, but I'll link all of this and you can read it for yourself. That he attended one seance and that his wife was regularly holding seances and claimed to have had the ability to speak to the dead, which we know as Christians, real Christians, those are demons. So, this begs the question, why are all these presidents keep invoking Lincoln? Now, let's take a look at this iPet Goat 2. This is chilling. There's Lady Liberty. Everybody knows the scene. The torch falls off. Directly after this scene comes the child in the egg, looked at by the serpent Lincoln. Now, I'm sorry I'm getting excited about this but this is crazy, you guys. I want you to let this sink in. These look like the National Monument, the Washington Monument, the obelisks as fingers. And there is the serpent seed right there. You have Lincoln staring right there with the reptilian skin, looking at what is actually been identified. We identified this on this channel as the method by which they make VCs. Right there. There's a cord attached like a serpentine snake, backlighting the embryo of the egg. Here's some more images of it here. This is how it's done. It's actually influenza manufactured, the VC for influenza. We discovered this like about 5-6 months ago. And there you see Lincoln staring into what basically is the VC. This is it. It's happening right now. There's Anubis. We saw that in Gaga's video. I'm just scrolling through here. Later, the serpent Lincoln makes a return. He comes back. Here he is here. I've got this in slow motion. Remember, it says 5 on the beard. The gaunt face standing above the sickened VC child. All of this just after the Liberty scene. See the child on the floor with the chicken egg shell head. Can't make this up. Look at the TV. So, let's put all this together. What's happening in this scene? Who likes to see himself on TV? Who's trying to give every American man, woman, and child a VC? Who loves money? That would be Trump. So, was Lincoln the serpent seed? Well, we know he was a giant. We know he's depicted as a giant in the Lincoln Memorial. We know that he devised what is called the Anaconda plan to crush the South. And in the drawings of the period, there's a giant snake or serpent wrapped around the South. Did you know that Lincoln was a wrestler? I didn't know that. He was a famous wrestler before he became president. So, based on what I've shown you, it appears as though all these presidents who invoke Lincoln and claim to be Christians are liars, as are all politicians. And this begs the question, do we really need presidents and governors? Was Trump appointed by God? This is the single most prolific question I get on this channel. People believe that Trump was appointed by God. What I'm going to demonstrate to you right now is how the biblical passages have been manipulated and misrepresented so that the powers that be can maintain control over humanity. How do I know this? Because the Bible does not contradict itself. Hosea 8:4. They have set up kings, but not by me. They have appointed princes, but I did not know it. With their silver and gold, they have made idols for themselves, that they might be cut off. That bill that we looked at, that's called a silverback, or silver. It represented the value of silver. They have made for themselves silver and gold, and they will be cut off. Our entire economy is based off of silver and gold. This is what I've been trying to get you guys to understand. All these channels, these quote-unquote Christian channels, telling you to buy silver and gold, run away. And look what God told the very first kings in the Bible. This is very telling, because they begged, the Israelites begged God. It's interesting how this site basically tries to make it look like a positive. But let's read in 1 Samuel 8. An amazing event is described that illustrates how God establishes or appoints rulers over nations. No, he didn't. He warned against it. But let's keep reading. This is how you have to read between the lines. The Lord said to Samuel, listen to the voice of the people and regard all that I say to you, for they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me from being king over them. Does that sound like God is pleased with people having a king? God allowed Israel to have their own king. Yes, he allowed it. Verses 10 through 18 record what God told Samuel to communicate to Israel that they would experience with their new king. The entire description is negative. And in verse 18 we read this, then you will cry out in that day because of your king, whom you have chosen for yourselves. But the Lord will not answer you in that day. How can this site say that God appointed the king when in this verse he's saying that he's not going to listen to you? That makes absolutely no sense. This is why you have to put on your own critical thinking cap. The message to Israel was simple. They should be allowed to select their ruler, but it was not the ruler God wanted for them. So how did he appoint the person then? The ruler would be an evil one who would oppress them. Yet God would appoint him and establish his throne, but he would not be God's choice. Now, that brings us to the verse in Romans, which all of the governments like to use to establish their authority over all of us. This passage was not talking about secular governments. It was talking about the church hierarchy. And the second that a person in leadership who is claiming to be a Christian, whose actions are polar opposite and diametrically opposed to what Christ taught, they lose their authority. And if you interpret Romans 13 that way, then the rest of these biblical passages do not contradict each other. But if you try to pull Romans out by itself and give authority to governments, then you're basically admitting that the Bible contradicts itself. And it doesn't, ever. And this is where biblical interpretations, they fail to take the rest of the Bible into account. You need the three witnesses. Here we have it. The three witnesses would be Hosea and Samuel, both warning against man choosing their own kings. Why are we in such denial? Because we love our wrestlers. We love our fake politics. We want it. And there's going to come a time where God will close his ears to all of us and will no longer listen. Now, I hope this got through to some people today. This is a very important message. Those people that keep saying that God has appointed Trump, you are wrong. You're just wrong. God would not have us following a man that every day isn't praying for the children in this country that don't even make it out of the womb. That's just one example. And all of the oppression that we go through, the taxation, the rules, the laws, the unfair laws, all of our freedoms being taken away every single day. This gold and silver based economy that God warns about over and over again. When will we wake up? I'm very sad to say that I don't think we ever will. The Bible says we won't. All we're doing here is waking up as many people as we can. That's the reason for this channel. There may be a few more that wake up, but most people will be deceived. We don't need a governor or a president. And neither did ancient Israel. I'm not talking about modern Israel. When I'm speaking of Israel, I'm talking about ancient Israel, which are two completely different peoples. All this tweet power, how about every single day you wake up, speak out against what's happening in this country in terms of children not even making it out of the womb? How about that? If I had the voice that he has and the people listening, that's what I'd be doing. Every single morning, let us pray for the 58 million who never made it out of the womb. All right. I love each and every one of you. I'm going to end the show here. We'll be back on here. I may upload montages over the weekend. One-tenth of 1%. That is what it took. 1/10 of 1% of fear for everyone to believe the lie. You think God isn't disappointed? And now we have a gift from God? The VCs being described now as a gift from God, playing to the right, which is exactly what we told you was going to happen when Trump loosened the guidelines on the whole campaign money being mixed with churches. The first clue we had was this money, this stimulus money being thrown at the churches as 501c3 organizations. They got more than any of us got. Then came the campaign money. Then the loosening of the guidelines with the 501c3 churches. That was the first clue. And now he is playing to his religious right and saying that this is a gift from God. And as I told you guys, most of Trump's supporters will get the VC. This has escalated exponentially over the last 2 months, with him now claiming to have the CV. And this is where we're at. Last time I checked, the gift from God was his son, Jesus Christ, Yeshua, who spilt his blood and healed through faith. Last time I checked, a person who claims to be a born-again Christian repents of all their sins and lives in daily repentance. Not ego, not pride, not saying that I never make mistakes. And this is where we're at. So, for those of you that have been following this channel for any amount of time, you've seen the work we've done on Abraham Lincoln. comparing him to Pennywise the clown. Lincoln was actually 1 year old when the first Pennywise event took place, where a lot of people died. That happened at Yahoo Falls. And every 27 years after that, Pennywise would strike again. Lincoln is the one sent president. Now, we did a decode on this, and I'll put links to that in the pinned comment, some of those Abraham Lincoln decodes, but we seem to be on the trail of Abraham Lincoln. Something didn't sit right with me, and the clues just kept pouring in. Today's show, we're going to extrapolate on that, and by the end of the show, you're going to see how Abraham Lincoln's appearance in Rosemary's Baby fits into the birthing of the Antichrist. Now, back then we realized that Lincoln was also a Trump archetype. And why would this be? Well, with one swipe of a pen, Trump signed 5G whiz and beyond. That was during the lockdowns, remember? And what that did is it kicked off the new copper age. You see, many more 5G whiz towers will be needed than 4G, and a very basic part of that infrastructure is copper. The copper markets have already started to go nuts. Have you read about that in the news? No, you haven't. But it's happening. And all of that copper is in demand. You got to ask yourself, is this the real reason for the penny shortage? We'll get into that in another show, but there's a lot more to this Lincoln story. And this brings us to today and a discovery that a subscriber named Jory made. Some of you are gamers and you pick up on a lot of this stuff that I don't pick up on, because I used to be a gamer back in my late 20s and early 30s. And just kind of don't do it anymore, but I hear that gaming has come a long way. And so I'm thankful for my subscribers that are gamers that can give me these clues. There's enough gameplay all over the internet and YouTube to where you can pick up some of these images without even having to buy the game. So, the game is BioShock Infinite. And this is what we're going to cover today. We're also going to cover BioShock Buried at Sea. We're going to look at the aspects of Lincoln. Now, the whole backdrop of this is the Civil WAR. And they have what are called these presidents that are kind of like reincarnated as motorized patriots, they're called. Here's some of the gameplay. I'm going to play this. Let's turn the volume off here. As the player encounters Lincoln, the motorized patriot. And as you can see here, he's got these what appear to be like wings. There he shooting at his head. They have these what appear to be wings. And I want you to remember these wings, because these wings will reappear in other forms and fashion. It's all about the fallen ones. Okay? They have a cover story for this. They're motorized patriots draped in the flag, but what they also are fallen, of the fallen bloodline. So he's shooting at this motorized patriot that is Abraham Lincoln. Now, before we get into the backdrop of how these motorized patriots fit into the game, understand that they are described as wearing porcelain masks. It's right in the gameplay. And basically what happens is, as they get shot at, the mask comes off. And this is what they look like. Kind of like a Terminator-esque type of scenario. And so I'm looking at these masks, and I'm like, there's something weird going on with this mask. So I counted the number of holes in the forehead, you know, like the mark on the forehead. Count with me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. There are 19 holes in the forehead of the Lincoln motorized patriot once he is unmasked. Now it's obvious here, he's also depicted as a clown. The red nose, a devil clown. The horns, with his fallen angel wings. Now this really confirms our Pennywise metaphor. Okay? As well as the possible link to Trump the Clown. We've uncovered that archetype in connection as well. Now, the backstory to this is pretty long and drawn out, so I'm going to spare you the details of it. Again, I'll link this backstory in the pinned comments so you can read it for yourself. But basically, there's this group called the Vox. And this whole thing is a retelling of the civil WAR. The Vox are basically depicted as like the Native Americans. They're compared to the Native Americans. You know, they're fighting against the founders, or what they are called. And the founders are greedy. They want power and control. And they depict Lincoln and these motorized patriots. They're on the side of the Vox, and they fight against the founders who hate Lincoln for standing up for the poor. This is how they depict this. I'm just telling you the story. They also, these Vox rebel, I guess, force, you could call them. Here they are here. The Vox. They also repurpose Zeppelin red balloons. They drape these red flags over them. And those of you that have followed this channel know exactly where this is headed. 99 red balloons. Now, there's another aspect to this. And this red balloon, because what this are the spirits of the dead encompassed in a balloon and used to create more death. And here's where we get our first connection between the red balloons and Abraham Lincoln. Now, many of you will remember that Pennywise the Clown floated on red balloons. And we had also discovered that helium represents Helios, the sun god, Apollo, and that helium is mined from decomposed methane. Methane represents the decomposition and death of life. And the United States is the world's top supplier of helium, mined from the earth with decomposed methane gas. And that brings us to another BioShock video game called Buried at Sea. I've got some gameplay of it here. This is episode 2, and it's called The Paris Introduction. And this little girl you're going to see here, let's play this. She is basically, there's this whole race of these little children. They're called Little Sisters. And in the video game, they are harvested for their DNA in this underwater world called BioShock. You're seeing how this all fits in to what's happening right now? And look at what she's doing here. She's chasing a red balloon. Let's back this up. So what is this red balloon really about? Well, let's get to that part so I can show you guys. The red balloon, I believe, in their mind are the disembodied spirits of the dead. Something happens when innocence is taken, and these evil ones thrive off of that. Now, of course, this is a reference to Le Ballon Rouge, which is the red balloon in French, right? This is what they wanted you to think of when you saw this. But even in that French film, Le Ballon Rouge, it's all about a child who chases this red balloon around. And even in that film, they allude to the fact that the balloon is a spirit. They admit it. Now in here, toward the back part of this, what you're going to see is this little girl. They're at this bird stand. He asks them if they want a bird in a cage. Well, that is definitely a reference to children in cages. And then you see this little girl with this red balloon. The game tells you talk to the girl. And when the lady startles her, she drops the balloon. Then the scene goes dark, and they show her chasing this balloon. There's some Janus Gemini references there, with the two faces mirrored one another. She chases this balloon through this dark landscape of the video game where everything's on fire. And I'll spare you the details, but basically they show the ace card fly in front of her face. This is exactly what's been going on with the swabs. And now they're saying that some people have had their brain punctured. It's all right here. Of course, they're showing a lobotomy. But this is exactly what they're doing. Going up through the nose with these swabs. They want your pineal gland. All right, here in this video game, they follow the girl. There's the wings again. Remember I told you, remember the wings. This is a different game. Angels and demons. Buried at Sea. This is the Buried at Sea game. The last one we looked at with Lincoln was BioShock Infinite. Then she goes down into this dungeon. And in the dungeon, you see the children being harvested. This was a video game, you guys. They're in these dungeons. This is exactly what these people are doing. Soul harvesters. Last time I checked, Trump's not doing anything about soul harvesting by the elite. Doing a lot of talk. Someone came on the channel and in the comment section and said that he's rounded up 90% of the PEDOs. I don't think so. Last time I checked, nobody in Hollywood went to jail. No producers. No actors. We know they're all doing it. Lady Gaga is still running around. Abramovich is still doing her cooking. Hillary, Bill. They're all walking free and more powerful than ever. So, is anything really being done? Well, there's the appearance of things being done. But is anything really being done? Let's be honest. Absolutely not. Because if it was being done, you wouldn't see stuff like this. This disclosure stuff being portrayed with boldness. Now, there's more. Lincoln commanded America's first Air Force. He even had an aircraft carrier, the very first aircraft carrier during the Civil War. Remember, we're talking about the symbolism behind these disembodied spirits inside of balloons. What, Casey? We had an Air Force during the Civil WAR? Yes, we did. He had a fleet of hydrogen balloons, different gas, Same concept. And he would fly over these Confederate positions to determine troop strength. Now, the story goes that several men bid on creating Lincoln's balloon air force. One guy's name was Wise. You know, like Pennywise? Now, Wise didn't get the contract, but he bid on it, and he's noted in history. There's a whole section of him on here. Can't make all this up. I could picture Lincoln out on the battlefield, yelling up at the balloon, because Tad Lowe was the guy who got the contract. I could picture Lincoln going, "Hey, you're a Tad Lowe." That was a dumb joke, but anyway, we got to laugh at this stuff too. So no doubt, this was Lincoln's red balloon fleet. If we put all the puzzle pieces together and we look at BioShock and how they use these Zeppelin balloons, right? Remember? And they would put red on them, and they had Lincoln on their side. When you put all the puzzle pieces together, this must have been Lincoln's 99 red balloon fleet. Now, he only had like 10 balloons. They would launch these balloons, and they would attach them to telegraph cords. And I'll let you read all that history for yourself. And they could message down recon intel. Some balloons they would detach, and those balloons would have to return flight. It was called free flight versus captive flight, and then they would have to come down and report their findings. But the better balloons were the ones that were tethered to a telegraph cord. You're starting to see what's happening here. And the ones that were attached to the telegraph cords could radio down immediately the positions of the troops. Regardless, they were deployed in several battles that gave the Union the advantage. Now, the South, they also had their version of these balloons, but they were a lot less effective. They would make them out of materials that they could throw together. Why? Because there was a blockade. They couldn't get the silk and rubber needed to make these balloons. So they would just throw things together and try, but they were not like Lincoln's Air Force. Now, these balloons weren't around very long, but they were around long enough to be noted in history. Here's some pictures. They had these hydrogen generators. Where did Lincoln get this technology? And here we are today. These are the roots of the most powerful, advanced Air Force in the world. The United States of America. This is where it started. Here's the Intrepid. Look at this. Now, I believe that these were the beginnings, and this started with the copper president, and it's going to end with a copper president. Trump, the 5G whiz copper president. Nowhere in history are we going to need as much copper as we're about to need for 5G whiz and beyond. And this is why I think that Trump is the modern personification of Pennywise. And that brings us to Rosemary's Baby. And this very troubling image, one of the most horrific scenes in film history. Now, I'm not going to show you this scene because it is very troubling. It's something you'll never forget. But basically, Rosemary is impregnated by Satan. But just before she's surrounded in this room by all of the occultists. and worshippers of Lucifer. And at the front of the room, overseeing this impregnation, is Abraham Lincoln with his hand on the Bible, overseeing the entire event. This is it right here. This is the screenshot. And around his waist, you see this very small but clear lightning bolt. And if you're not sitting down, you might want to sit down for this. There it is right there. Because Abraham Lincoln was the telegraph president. You know the telegraphs that we just talked about, the red balloons? And he called the telegraph lightning messages. And he would popularize electricity sent through power lines. You know, like Lucifer fell like lightning from heaven. History Channel even says that he slept next to the telegraph. He was the first wired president. And of course, the rest is history. Electricity, which would become the bedrock of the development of the modern world. So, why is Lincoln present at the conception of the Antichrist in the film Rosemary's Baby? What's he doing in this room? And why do politicians like Trump and Pence and Biden keep repeating this man's legacy in their campaign speeches? You better wake up. Time is running out, you guys. Where's your allegiance? Is your allegiance in man? These people report directly to Lucifer himself. The Bible is very clear who rules this world. So if he rules this world, that means every single politician under his power is working for him. You can't slice it any other way. When you keep believing in man, you basically believe in the devil. You're waiting to be deceived. Here's the history of the telegraph and how it was around during the Civil WAR, but they used Morse code already, but it was not widely used. Shortly after this, within a couple decades, of course, Tesla and the whole story behind that, and the race, the electricity race occurred, Westinghouse, all that came just after Lincoln. He's the one that really kicked all of this off. So, there you go. We will be back. I have shows scheduled out.
Is it possible that Lincoln was killed in 1861?
Lincoln is coming through Baltimore on his way to his inauguration.
That would mean someone impersonated him for the next 4 years.
We will have the opportunity to kill him within the next 12 hours.
Appearances can be most deceiving, but not in this case, James Kirk. I am Abraham Lincoln.
Would you care to take a look? 44 caliber. It's a beautiful little pistol. Just like the gun that killed Lincoln.
Not like, Mr. Colton. The same gun.
The gun that murdered Lincoln was a 44 caliber single-shot muzzle-loading Derringer. Did you ever own such a gun? Yes. Two. For a present from my daddy. For the war. A birthday present he sent to Philadelphia for them. He said that no well-dressed poker player could fill a flush without them. They're made in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Spelled with one R. My name is spelled with two. Extraordinary.
Palmer's been down through 12 feet of water. The chest isn't there.
12 feet of water. Of course. That well was 20 feet deep when he threw it in. Mr. Williams.
Yes, sir.
Where did you find this chest?
In the old well on the plantation where I flung it in 1861.
It's buried under 8 feet of mud. Thank you, Francine. I'll take care of it. If the prosecution intends to prove that Mr. Derringer owned a brace of 44 caliber pistols, identical in make and model to the assassination weapon, we concede the fact. These will prove conclusively that Derringer could not have sold one of those pistols to John Wilkes Booth.
Mint condition? Never even been fired. You will please notice, sir, the colonel had Marshancy's name engraved on each barrel.
By killing Lincoln here in Baltimore, the Southern secessionists will be blamed.
But it's almost as though the tunnel is making its own projection, independent of the probe on Doug and Tony.
And in revenge, the northern states will invade the South.
Did you fire those shots?
Well, I reckon I did. I can't kill rabbits by spitting on them.
Got pockets everywhere? I could pull rabbits out of here.
Rabbits? Well, sure. Yeah.
As far as we can tell, based on our years of research, these portals include copper, the Lincoln archetype, some kind of rabbit, mirrors, and banks or money. These very themes repeat in the film Somewhere in Time.
This section of town's home to half the rabbits in the county.
Rabbits. Well, Mr. Pinkerton, I found the man who fired those shots, sir. Just a hunter after rabbits.
That rabbit hunter could have been a ruse. This platform was left unguarded for a few minutes.
And one more thing. Does anyone else see this rabbit, okay? I'm not the only one who sees that rabbit, right? And it's wearing glasses, is that real? Okay. I think this might be a Donnie Darko situation. Fantastic movie, by the way. Love Jake Gyllenhaal.
Mr. President, do you still measure time in minutes? We can convert to it, sir.
I understand President Lincoln's coming aboard, sir.
Full dress uniforms.
Full dress? Presidential honors? What is all this nonsense, Mr. Dickerson?
Mineral, he called it. Like living rock.
Like living rock. Like living rock.
And that became Lincoln. I couldn't tell. Just what was it you locked onto before you beamed him aboard? His kindness, his gentle wisdom, his humor, everything about him is so right. I cannot conceive it possible that Abraham Lincoln could have actually been reincarnated.
Mr. Scott.
What a charming negress. Oh, forgive me, my dear.
You see, in our century, we've learned not to fear words.
I know that in my time some use that term as a description of property.
But why should I object to that term, sir?
I am observing the alien. Well, at least somebody agrees with us he's an alien.
Yes, of course he's an alien.
And he's potentially dangerous. It is a magnificent work of duplication.
And slings and spears. Slings. Mr. President, you used a sling as a boy. Indeed, I did.
to use a sling as a boy. Indeed I did.
It was so hard for me to see him die again.
Captain Kirk, the planet has resumed its normal appearance.
Few people are aware that Lincoln was one of our first time travelers.
Well, you know what they say about good things happening to those who wait.
But only the things left behind by those who hustle, he said.
Mary!
Abe, what is that?
I might as well tell you, it's a time machine.
I couldn't believe it. It was a quote by Abraham Lincoln, and I was thinking the exact same thing.
What are the odds?
I've invented a time machine.
Oh, Abe.
No, it's true, I tell you. Mary, do you realize what this means? It means I could go forward or backward to any point in time. Excuse me, Sonny. Are you John Wilkes Booth?
Oh, yes, I
It was a quote by Abraham Lincoln.
Yes?
John Wilkes Booth?
Yes, sir, that's me. Thanks. Who are you?
Darling, these past few days have been wonderful, but it's not that I don't love you anymore. I do. If I could, I would make you Mrs. John Wilkes Booth. All my life, I've been pursued by this stranger who keeps trying to kill me.
Well, you know what they say about good things happening to those who wait.
But only the things left behind by those who hustle, he said.
Oh, he is a depraved and evil man. Tall and dark with a sinister top hat and a demonic beard. Hey! What are you doing? Wait a minute. You again!
What, are you gonna play for me?
No, I'm gonna play the past. This is a USFF coordinates transformer field kit. No moving parts. It weighs approximately 6 kilos, fully charged. I've adjusted it to support our body mass.
Abraham Lincoln was shot and killed by John Wilkes Booth on April 14, 1865.
It will calculate a discrete arrival location and avoid any materialization collisions.
In Lincoln's pockets, doctors found a blackjack, some piano wire, and several sticks of dynamite.
So what is it?
It's a device that creates a temporal wake.
A what?
It's a time machine.
Are you all my personal dreams?
quote by Abraham Lincoln.
To close your eyes. Why do I need to close my eyes? You're here to create history and influence what is to come. You are more than an agent, you're a gift, given to the world through a predestination paradox.
It was a quote by Abraham Lincoln.
You're the only one, free from history, ancestry.
You're the only one. You're the only one.
There can be only one.
You're the only one.
I've been alive for 4.5 centuries, and I cannot die. I am Conor MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod. I was born in 1518 in the village of Glenfinnan on the shores of Loch Shiel. I am immortal. I am Conor MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod. I am Conor MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod. Conor MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod.
The snake that eats its own tail forever and ever. The rooster. The rooster. The rooster. The rooster. The rooster.
Okay, I think we're back. So basically what this is a story about a guy who basically is a serial killer, and he goes around killing all these people during the film. His wife finds out, this is her here, that he's doing this, and she figures that she's going to take him out, but on her terms. And she has the husband fooled, thinking that he got away with it and that she's just going to live her life with him. This is the detective who finally figures it all out, but that isn't until the end, the very end of the film. And let's play this back, because I don't think you guys heard that.
I found it.
It's blurred.
Some people are that way too.
Like it's 2 pennies. Like it's 2 pennies. Like it's 2 pennies.
So this is basically what this amounts to, is a tale of 2 pennies. The killer admits that he's basically has this obsession with double-struck pennies. And what that's a metaphor for is the 2 faces of Janus, the Gemini, the 2 sides. We all talked about the Gemini coin, the Janus coin. Remember that? That was a couple shows ago. I showed you the double-faced coin that Paul Revere made of Janus. It's actually a triple-faced coin that means past, present, and future. That's what this is really all about. So that's what's going on with this film called A Bad Marriage. And I don't know if you guys heard it, but a bad marriage, or a good marriage, is what it's called. AGM, the acronym backwards is MGA, kind of like MAGA. And definitely Stephen King knows something about this Lincoln Pennywise matrix and all these connections, and because these clues are throughout his work. With Stephen King's It, the Pennywise clown, he floats on helium, which is the Helios that we discovered. And we saw in Donnie Darko, his mother, Mary, who is played by Mary McDonald, basically is sitting in the opening of that film reading a Stephen King book, his It book. and she's in front of a trampoline. Trampoline represents weightlessness, and that dovetails into Helios and helium as well. So this bizarre theme of these two Lincolns is woven into film history at different times and places. So we're going to review this montage along with two others on today's show. I think we got the sound issues worked out. I just unplugged the mic. I don't know what's going on with, I'm not the mic, but I unplugged the headphones. I think it's a headphone short. But we're going to continue on with this.
I found it on yesterday's pennies from Heaven blog. The guy who owns it has it listed for like, I don't know, $15,000, which is ridiculous. But I think I could get it for $9.
I think I could get it for $9. I think I could get it for $9.
I picked up 17 Lady Liberties at a good...
So obviously, what they're talking about here is these double struck coins, as I just said. And it's really two coins. It's not really one. It's two Trumps, not just one. Now, Trump admits this. This isn't a big secret. He's admitted it, actually, in his own words, that there are two Trumps. And other people have taken notice of this. There's actually a really good channel out there. Gosh, I think I liked the videos. If you go into my liked videos on my channel here, you'll see that I liked this video maybe yesterday or the day before. And basically, that channel outlines the 1988 Grammys, in which Michael Jackson sang Man in the Mirror. And during that Grammys, Billy Crystal mentions Trump's name. Now, I don't know if it was right before or after Michael Jackson sang Man in the Mirror, but there's something to this, and they all know it. That particular montage on that channel also mentions the Trump in the Mirror, the Saturday Night Live skit. That was on Blind 11 in like 2000, I can't remember what year that was, but he picked a very peculiar day to do that particular skit, that comedy skit on Saturday Night Live. And he was sitting, looking at himself in the mirror. And so there's something to this. Now, film history likes to joke about these two Lincolns, and that's what we're going to get into today. Some of these montages are going to cover an array of different times in film history, different TV shows where they joke about two Lincolns or a Lincoln clone. But I don't think they're joking. I think this is real to some extent. I don't know how or why, but it is. So let's keep going with this.
No, great price.
Any luck finding the great lost penny?
No, not yet. But you know, all good things come to those who wait. I'm just a lousy coin collecting accountant. I can tell you how grateful I am for the second chance to be here to see all of this.
Now, this part's creepy because he's at his daughter's wedding. This is his daughter. And this family actually reminds me of the Trump family. There's two brothers, and then Ivanka. And then, so basically, this is like the Trump archetype in this film. And then it gets like inappropriate. The song playing in the background is actually a love song. And then you see him dancing with her as a little girl, which kind of sounds and looks a lot like how Trump was with Ivanka when she was little. There are a multitude of pictures. It's not just me saying that. It gives everybody the creeps.
Tell me you'll miss me while I'm alone, blue as...
Now, what's important to note are the pink balloons. And, of course, it's helium, right? But there's more to it. The pink, of course, is the ADRENO chrome. And you're going to see this repeated. I don't ever just put up part of a montage or a clip unless I get confirmation in another part of the film. And I do get confirmation. You're going to see a helium balloon used around the time of the Civil War. Watch. See how he moves his hand down? It's just weird. And he's got this strange look in his eye. And then he hands over his daughter to the husband. And he's got this creepy look, kind of like the creepy look Trump would get.
found it in the change bear.
And there's the confirmation I got that my suspicions were correct about the balloons. You can't just put a clip up about a helium balloon, meaning that unless it's got some significance to the particular scene and it repeats later on in the film. As far as I can tell, this helium is the Pennywise demon. It's some kind of spirit, unfamiliar spirit that is possessing these world leaders. Helios, helium. Let's keep watching. Now there's more to the helium. Actually, these are hydrogen balloons, and these were used during the Civil War by Lincoln himself. This is basically when they got invented. I mean, the technology was there, but it basically came into more wide use during the Civil War. Lincoln would use these balloons to spy on the Confederate soldiers. They then came up with their own balloons, but their balloons, because of the blockade, they had to make them out of silk. And it's kind of weird because they picked this year, or actually it was last year, to make this balloon movie called Aeronauts. It's all about hot air balloons because they know something, right? How often do we get hot air balloon movies? Almost never. I can't remember the last hot air balloon movie we had. It's been a very, very long time. So obviously it's inspired by true events. I have not watched this movie, but I can almost guarantee you there'll be Civil War references in here. Maybe even a lot of copper, pennies, something. There's going to be all of that, probably. Let's keep watching.
Oh my gosh, how many years have you been searching for this?
Since I was 14 years old.
Now, the beginning of this film opens with this newspaper, and it's dated June 13th. That's the day before Trump's birthday. Remember, I always look for several confirmations before putting together a decode like this, so I just don't assume everything has to do with Trump. This is the day before his birthday. It's actually Jason Voorhees' birthday, who was also born in the same year Donald Trump was born. We're going to be decoding Friday the 13th. I think that's tomorrow afternoon. There's Jason Voorhees, and of course, Trump. Now, if you think that's weird and a stretch, understand that the very first Friday the 13th film released the day before Trump's mother's birthday. So, another reason I put together this montage is because there's a Superman connection. Trump just called himself Superman. And this is Lupercalia, is the name of the actor who plays the serial killer in A Bad Marriage, or A Good Marriage. Sorry, I keep saying A Bad Marriage because it is a bad marriage. And basically, he has this fascination with Superman. He played the voice of Lex Luthor in the cartoon series, which you're going to see in a second here. And here he is at the premiere of Man of Steel with his wife. They're no longer married. They were married 17 years. Let's watch. Now, I want you to listen carefully. Now, this is Anthony Lupercalia's voice playing Lex Luthor. And you're going to hear everything we talked about, electromagnetism, time travel, all of that is mentioned by Lex Luthor here.
Welcome to the new world. Lay down your weapons and you won't be hurt. I'll be moving into the White House later today. I'll make my formal declaration then.
Twin buildings, twin pennies, Trump Tower and IBM Tower. They're twin buildings. One just looks a little different than the other.
Little
clouds of possibility. Everything's connected. It's so obvious.
Uncle Lex?
The fundamental forces are yoked by consciousness.
And I woke up the next morning and I felt like Superman.
Everyone. And this is how he sees things all the time. And the clockwork doesn't care. It's like it's all just us in here together. It's a cruel joke. The mechanistic clockwork of reality hinging on a precious, impossible defiance of entropy.
Hours.
Relative to us, he just figured out how everything works.
I saw everything. I saw how to save the world.
Gravity warps time. Superman trapped me in a relativistic conundrum.
The gravity gun sped up his clock a little, looking for this.
I could have saved the world. I could have made everyone see.
If it had mattered to you, Luthor, you could have saved the world years ago.
So, as you can see, there's more to this than meets the eye. Now, we're going to get into some of these other montages. The first one is called Time Tunnel. And it's a series from 1966. And it's about time travel. And the episode we're going to focus on has Lincoln in it.
Is it possible that Lincoln was killed in 1861?
Lincoln is coming through Baltimore and is
all right.
His way to his inauguration.
That would mean someone impersonated him for the next 4 years.
Pause.
We will have the opportunity to kill him within the next 12 hours.
Appearances can be most deceiving, but not in this case, James Kirk. I am Abraham Lincoln.
But you killed him.
There we go. All right. So basically, this is called the Time Tunnel. TTT, right? And that's how they shorten it too. It's kind of. And basically, what it's about is time. And in this particular episode, they basically pretend like there are two Lincolns. And you're going to get what she says here as I play this out. And of course, 66 is the penthouse number that Trump in his penthouse is at Trump Tower. And we've already proven that association, the number 66 with Trump. In fact, let me play this first, then I'll show you what else I have here.
1861?
Lincoln is coming through Baltimore on his way to his inauguration.
That would mean someone impersonated him for the next 4 years.
We will have the opportunity to kill him within the next 12 hours.
Appearances can be most deceiving, but not in this case, James.
So we're going to pause that there. So basically, this is his grandmother. This is Trump's grandmother. And I want to prove to you that the number 66 is very important. She was born in Bavaria. People always forget that, the Bavarian Illuminati. But more importantly, his grandmother died on 6/6/66. Now, that doesn't give you chills and help you bring pause to what it is we're all doing here. I don't know what does. Who dies on 6/6/66? And basically, she's the one, his grandmother here, is the one who established the Trump family real estate empire. She who basically started it all. Now, this is on his father's side. And on his mother's side, is the McLeod family. We've done a lot of work on the McLeod. Here is the wicked man. So there's some kind of weird 66 associated with the Trump family. And look who his mother was. His mother was Anne Fraser. Kind of sounds like Claire Fraser from Outlander, the Outlander TV series. she was a time traveler too. And remember, the standing stones from that series, Outlander, was literally 14 miles from where Trump's mother was born. And of course, the McLeod clan is from the Isle of Lewis, like Trump's mother, Mary Ann McLeod. And it's weird, she was mugged on Halloween. She can't like help them or see them, or all they can do is send them little clues and out of the tunnel, but they really can't reach them to any significant degree. Here's the guys right here. These are the two. In this instance, these guys keep shuffled around in time like a shuffling deck of cards. They end up in right near the time of the assassination of Lincoln. You just said about there being a clone or two Lincolns. Now, you're going to see two other TV series interdispersed with this one as well that also took place, one of them anyway, in 1966. So the 66 theme is very real. Both have the same subject of Lincoln being a clone. The next part you're going to see is Star Trek Season 3, Episode 22. 3 times 22 is 66, another 66. And the same thing. We have Lincoln appearing.
But not in this case, James Kirk. I am Abraham Lincoln.
Would you care to take a look?
And what you're looking at here is from Yankee Ranger. It was a Western series, TV series started in 1958. This is the 1958 television 58 number. Now,
Recorded Lincoln with 44 caliber. The Derringer could not have sold one of those pistols to John Wilkes Booth.
Mint condition? Never even been fired. You will please notice, sir, the colonel had Marchancy's name engraved on each barrel.
By killing Lincoln here in Baltimore.
So this is basically what this is all about with this next clip that you're going to see from Star Trek.
By the way, love Jake Gyllenhaal.
Mr. President, do you still measure time in minutes? We can convert to it, sir.
I understand President Lincoln's coming aboard, sir.
Full dress uniforms.
Full dress? Presidential honors? What is all this nonsense, Mr. Dickerson? Mineral, he called it. Like living rock.
Like living rock. Like living rock.
And that became Lincoln.
I couldn't tell.
Just what was it you locked onto before you beamed him aboard?
Now, the crew of the Enterprise describes the shape-shifting rock, who is basically calling the shots, as living rock, and it's able to shapeshift and transform into other beings, right? And it's probably the one who created the clones, the Lincoln clone, and the other clones that you're going to see, or that you would see in this episode if you were to watch this episode, where they're battling it out between good and evil. And it's weird because living rock is exactly what they call copper. This is an experiment that was done. Copper under the microscope. Is it alive? This was a question some scientists asked themselves when they observed copper particles swimming like a school of fish under the microscope. When physicists Narayan Menon and Vijay Narayan agitated the tiny copper rods in a liquid-filled container, the rods mysteriously aligned themselves and began moving in the same direction, resembling schools of fish. Only copper rods with pinched ends, shaped like rolling pins, exhibited the unique swarming motion. So, copper is the living rock. Let's keep watching here. remember yesterday we did a video showing you the magnets, strong magnets, and how they react to copper. And it's very interesting because time seems to slow down. And I wonder, you see all these experiments on YouTube, people with a copper pipe, a long copper pipe, and they drop a magnet, a special kind of magnet, I forgot what it's called. They drop it down the copper pipe. When they drop that magnet down through the pipe, the magnet slows down. And I wonder if you had two perfectly synchronized atomic watches and you attached one to the magnet before dropping it through the pipe and you held the other in your hand, if you would notice a difference in the phase shift of time. We already know that when you get into an airplane and you fly at super high speeds holding an atomic clock, and then you land and compare that atomic clock to the people on the ground, we know that that clock is different. It's a minute amount, but it's different. And I'm wondering if copper has the same effects. Now, I don't have the materials to do this. I don't have an atomic wristwatch or anything like that. But if any of you have those materials and you want to try that experiment, please do it and send me the video and I'll post it. But basically, what is this all about? Is this about the magnetic field, like Lex Luthor just said? Let's keep watching. All right.
His kindness, his gentle wisdom, his humor, everything about him is so right. I cannot conceive it possible that Abraham Lincoln could have actually been reincarnated.
Mr. Scott.
What a charming negress. Oh, forgive me, my dear.
You see, in our century, we've learned not to fear words.
I know that in my time some use that term as a description of property.
But why should I object to that term, sir?
I am observing the alien.
Now, it's interesting because, as you just heard,
well, at last, at least somebody agrees with us he's an alien.
Yes, of course he's an alien.
And he's potentially dangerous.
It is a magnificent work of duplication.
And slings and spears. Slings. Mr. President, you used a sling as a boy.
Indeed, I did.
To use a sling as a boy. Indeed, I did.
It was so hard for me to see him die again.
Captain Kirk, the planet...
All right. Next montage. Now, what this is a Saturday Night Live skit, another one about Lincoln, right? So we had the Baldwin skit about Lincoln, and now we've got this skit about Lincoln.
People are aware that Lincoln was one of our first.
I want you to watch and listen.
Time travelers.
Well, you know what they say about good things happening to those who wait.
But only the things left behind by those who hustle, he said.
Mary!
Abe, what is that?
I might as well tell you, it's a time machine.
So, I also interwove this montage with some clips from the film Predestination about time travel. And in Predestination, they mention Lincoln again. Now, what we had discovered on this channel was that most of these time machines that are mentioned in film history all have a component of copper to them. A lot of copper, not just little bits and pieces of copper, made out of copper, basically. And that's no different than what you're looking at now. Let's keep watching. as I guess we could say that on YouTube. And that's part of this, as Lincoln basically cross-dresses, and we saw the same thing in Predestination, the film. The time-traveling character basically is male and... What's up with this? Well, there's something to it, right? Obviously.
It's gone. The Ebola virus. Just stay calm, sir. The doctor's almost here.
Jesus wept.
Do you understand the word emergency?
Do you understand the words bite me?
Bite me, bite me.
That's a sign for infectious disease.
My God. He is infected.
And there's the arrow. Now, this is an episode of Battlestar Galactica where they use the Apollo's arrow to jump through time through standing stones. The theme persists. There's Trump's coat of arms.
Olga?
Yes, Mr. Parker.
You still want to check out that honeymoon suite?
You managed to contain the virus to yourself. We checked everyone who came near you last night. All negative.
Checked everyone who came near you last night. All negative. Now I'm curious, before we get into the second part of the show, to find out if there are any links to Trump and Gettysburg right now that would show up. Let's do a search. Trump, Gettysburg. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. I hope you guys all had a great weekend. You know, I don't like to beat you guys up about the holidays. We all know about the holidays and the pagan roots of the holidays. I know a lot of channels do videos on these holidays every single time and guilt people. Yes, we should be talking about these things, and we have many, many times in the past. We should expose these things. But there is a line that gets crossed where you start guilting and shaming and drawing lines in the sand and saying all these people are going to, you know, not be saved and all these things, okay? And all that does is continue to divide the body of Christ. So just be careful when, you know, about these subjects, all right? Everybody will be judged, right? And what happens is people bring upon themselves certain curses in their life by continuing along with some of these practices. And we all know that. I know that. I see people being cursed by their own behaviors and things that they do, thinking that they need to hold to some of these things. And we should pray for those people. We shouldn't condemn them or say, you know, you're going to do this or you're going to end up like that. So I just wanted to say those few words, and because many of you are probably asking, why didn't you do an Ishtar or an Inanna video? Well, we did those for like 5 years straight. Every single year we would upload those. So everybody knows the, you know, everything about that. The interesting thing, though, I can tell you this, is that a lot of our research recently about Apollo and Artemis and some of these ancient Roman gods dovetails right into Ishtar and Inanna. In fact, I think I heard on Now You See TV was talking about Inanna and how she dovetailed into some of these ancient Roman goddesses. And so it's interesting that we've been talking about all this, haven't we? So let me make sure we're connected up here. Looks like you guys are good. How's the sound, you guys? And we'll get into this morning's show. Now, there have been some new developments with the umbrella syringe matrix. And what are the new developments? Well, the Umbrella Academy TV series. And this is what we're going to break down today. And I'll tell you this, for some reason, I have an aversion to these kinds of teen films. And I don't know why. I had to pray about this. I'm like, God, why can't I watch Harry Potter? Why can't I watch some of these teen films that dealing with magic and all this stuff? And the Holy Spirit spoke to me and said, it's because it's very troubling. And that because this is the shape of things to come. A world ruled by children. Children shaming adults. And so this is actually what's happening. And this happens in all of these series where children are become the adults, basically. They take the place of adults. They shame adults. And this is why I have an aversion to these kinds of films and why I can't really sit through an entire series. Sometimes I can do the films, but not the series. So today you're going to get a Cliff Notes version of this series, The Umbrella Academy. So let me get you caught up first on the Umbrella Syringe Smack Scene Matrix. And then we'll get into the Umbrella Academy series. So, based on our work so far and revelations by the Holy Spirit and all of the work that you guys have sent in, we've decoded that the umbrellas are syringes. Now, they also look like bats when they're opened, don't they, from the side view? And that was another revelation that came from you guys. And I was like, wow, that has significance because all this talk has been about bats and snakes, hasn't it? Now, interestingly, what you're looking at your screen here is called the Guinness clock from the London Fair in 1951. Now, Guinness was into Alice in Wonderland, as you can see here. And he actually incorporated characters from Alice in Wonderland into this Guinness Festival clock that we're going to break a little bit down before we get into the Umbrella Academy. He incorporated the Mad Hatter into this clock. So let's take a look at this clock because this is very bizarre. There's a man with an umbrella in it, and that's why we're talking about this clock today. And one of you actually sent this in. If you're in the chat right now, please call yourself out so you can take credit for this find. And you notice that there were all the elements that we've been talking about over the past 2 weeks. The umbrella, the syringe, the serrated buzz saw or circular saw. All incorporated into elements of this clock, this Guinness clock. Let's take a look at some of these pictures. Here you see on the right the serrated buzz saw sun. The umbrella, remember this looks like a bat from the side view, and a syringe at the bottom. Now this syringe at the bottom is hidden. It's not an actual syringe, but it's in the shape of a syringe. So we've got this Guinness Alice in Wonderland Festival clock. And you have the Mad Hatter, and I believe the Mad Hatter is this guy here poking out from the top here. And look at this. It even says Guinness in Festival Land in this little poem from this period piece. The walrus and the carpenter were walking hand in hand. They strolled across the river Thames from halfway down the Strand. Guinness in Festival Land. So there's something here, isn't there? Here's a black and white image. This almost looks like a spider up here, doesn't it? This thing rotates around. I've got a video of this that we're going to take a look at in Vimeo. We can actually see this thing in action. 1951. 1951. Now, back in history, during 1951, I think this was just before the polio spam-demic is when this popped off. Here's a color image, and there you see the serrated edge sun, the sawtooth sun, above the umbrella, above the syringe, all in one line. And to the left, the Mad Hatter comes out of this house, and he catches what appears to me to be fish within fish, fish eating fish. Of course, this is the nested reality that we've talked about and discovered, that things in this reality are always things within things. And through that truth, you can actually decode and decrypt this reality, and as well as meanings of things. Because sometimes things mean things within inside of things, don't they? As we had discovered. So, you've got the Mad Hatter popping out of this house, catching fish within fish. Now, here's where things get crazy, because if you look at this serrated edge sun, I'm going to remind you of where we had seen this before. And that is inside this machine called the willowing machine. You can see it right here. The willowing machine. Let me back this out so you guys can see this. All right. Now this is one such machine for sale on Alibaba. Willow machine, as you can see there, it says right there. And as you can see in here, there are these spikes, these serrated edge spike cylinders. And these are used to do what? They're used to whip the wool. It's also used to whip the cotton. And why do they do this? They do this to remove the impurities. Whipping of the wool. Now, in fact, Willow Smith, which is Will Smith's daughter, she probably got the idea of whipping her hair from an ancient Ethiopian ritual. What is the ritual? It's called the Oromo dance of the whipping of the hair. Now, this ancient ritual, I'm going to show you just a part of this, was done by the Oromo people of Ethiopia. Oromo tribe is from the Kushite tribe, the Cushitic ethnic group. Now, I'm not making any assumptions about this group based on their roots, but we all know who Cush was. Cush was the son of Ham, father of Nimrod, from which the entire bloodline of the pharaohs likely came. Mithra, right? And Mithraism. Mithraism was the son of Ham as well, and brother to Cush. The pharaohs actually came out of the Mithraism bloodline. In fact, Mithraism is translated as Egypt in the Old Testament. It was the very first mention of the word Egypt in the entire Bible was the name Mithraism of Egypt. So, there's something going on here, isn't there? Let's watch a little bit of this. I'm going to mute the sound here. But this is the hair whipping ritual of the Oromo people. This is an ancient ritual. So there you go. She's whipping her hair back and forth. We already know what the willow machine is. We know Willow Smith is, who shaved her head. Shaving of the wool ritual. It's the shearing of the wool. Now this other lady gets on here, and she is, I mean, this is crazy. Let's watch some of this. This reminds me of like possession, okay? Spirit possession. People do this, and some of these rituals, I'm not saying this one is, but some of these, this is the type of thing people do when they're allowing a spirit to enter their body. You see this translate into some of the voodoo religions. You see this whipping of the head and this trance state that they go into. Okay. And again, I'm not saying that this is what these people are doing. I'm saying that this is the type of thing you would do if you were to allow this to happen, to allow a spirit to enter you. In some of these voodoo religions, probably where they learned it from. Now we know that the hair is a pathway of connection to the Holy Spirit, but it could also be a pathway in connection to the dark spirits of the dark realm. Our hair is a pathway, isn't it? And, you can imagine that whipping the hair like this would activate all of the follicles of the hair on your head to maybe receive something. So this could be the mechanism. Now, I'm speaking in theory here. I don't know any of this for a fact, but these are just observations based on our research. So, the whipping of the hair, the Oromo people, the Cushites. Now, what else do we have here? Oh, I wanted to show you this. Let me turn the music off here. Let's see. How do we turn the music off here? Well, we don't need to turn the music off. Let me show you this, and I'll just scan through it. But this is the actual clock, the Guinness clock. Actual video. Look at that. There's the sawtooth, and you really have to see this because it fits into this sawtooth willowing machine, the whipping of the wool, doesn't it? As you see the sun spinning around in a circle like a sawtooth blade. There's the umbrella. There's the Mad Hatter catching the fish within fish. Now that could be a mockery, Christ mockery, because Christ caught a bunch of fish, didn't he? The spider-like, hydra-like, spinning, whatever you call that. I forget what they call those. What's that called when these are like these things are what spin around over a baby's head in a crib, right? Somebody can help me probably with the name. Now, when I first saw that, I thought they were flying monkeys. There might be a monkey or two here, which would be another confirmation, right? So there's something here, isn't there? There's something here. Now, how do I know we're onto something? Well, the Bible compares Jesus to a silent lamb who was being sheared. The silence of the lambs. Here it is in Acts 8:32. Now the place in the book where he was reading was this: he was taken like a sheep to be put to death, and as a lamb is quiet when its wool is being cut, so he made no sound. This must be where the silence of the lambs came from. Again, Christ's mockery. So it's appearing to me that this whole shearing of the sheep is the shearing of our connection and the preparation for death. This is what this shaved head ritual is at its core. Now, I want to be sure to let you guys know that this isn't about every single person that shaves their head. That's not what I'm saying. A lot of people shave their head on the show. I don't want you to go away, all freaked out, going, oh my gosh, what am I going to do now? Maybe I should stop doing this. No, it's not about you. This is about the elite and their symbolism and their magic and sorcery that they're casting upon us. They know exactly what they're doing. You don't get a person at the top who is controlled by the elite, controlled by Satan himself. They have millions and millions of followers. Hollywood, they've got controllers in place. You don't have a woman with perfectly good hair shaving their head. Why would they do that? because they were told to do it. And that's what I'm talking about here. Not judgment upon you and me and the people that had no idea that this even existed. If anything, you might be a victim of the sorcery and the programming, which might have caused you to want to do this, to shave your head. And that was between you and God. You know, you have to pray going, oh, well, did I shave my head because Bruce Willis did it and I think it looked great on him? And you know, because he's part of this as well, as we demonstrated. His very last role, Bruce Willis's very last role, was a mute swan. His character's name was Swan. This is his last role before he lost his ability to speak. So all these people are involved with this, and they projected this programming and sorcery onto the rest of us, and this shapes our lives. And this is why you got to be careful about seeking after these people who have these riches and influence, all these things, because you could be led the wrong way. Now, let's get back to this willowing machine. Let me check in with you guys first. I always hit you guys with these crazy shows on Monday, don't I? Make sure you guys are with me. Looks like you guys are. Now, let's keep going with this, because there's a lot more to this. Because we covered the willowing machine. Well, it's also called a willying machine. Okay, Willie, Will Smith. And this thing has actually been called a devil, because it's also called a twilly. A machine for cleansing and loosening wool by the action of a revolving cylinder covered with long iron spikes or teeth. A willy or willing machine, called also a twilly devil and devil. Now, there was a reference. Look at this. It's even got the lupus and wolf in this list of things that are in line with this. The wolf. Now, I don't know how the wolf fits in here, but it's listed here. Black wolf, lupus, Lupercalia. Interesting. The willing machine. Now, for those of you that are researchers like myself, all of these links will be in the pinned comment, because I want you to double check my work. So, now this brings us to the film, or the series, I'm sorry, The Umbrella Academy. So several of you asked me to look at this series because you felt as though it fit into this matrix that we'd uncovered over the last few weeks, and you were absolutely right. There is, in fact, a syringe component to this series. The Umbrella Academy. Here's the logo, as you can see here. The rain falling on the bat-shaped umbrella, which is a hypodermic needle, remember. If you're unsure about the connection there, look at the previous shows we've done on the umbrella is a syringe. But here it is. And let me give you a little bit of the backdrop of this series before we get into some of this. Here's an actual scene from the film, a GIF, or a scene from the series. I keep calling it a film. Look at the bloody hands, the syringe. This guy passes out. So, the founder of the Umbrella Academy, he's this doctor, and he does experiments on chimps. And it results in pregnant women spontaneously spawning children with superpowers. The doctor then finds those children, and 7 of them he asks to come live at the Umbrella Academy, he calls it. Let's take a look at this.
As mentioned earlier, Hargreaves purchased an umbrella business in 1928, and from here he built his fortune.
So there you saw the Umbrella Academy, or the Umbrella store. Okay, that he walks up on it right here. Let me zoom this up for you. This is the doctor, and this is his store. I looked around in this image to see if there was any other things, any other clues that I could find about this. You do see lots of fruit here, because we are the fruit. This is the big joke. And let's keep watching.
Built his fortune. We learn in the 1950s and 60s that the character began to contribute to our space division. At this point he emerged once more after learning that 43 women had mysteriously given birth to children after showing no signs of pregnancy.
So 43 women give birth to children after no signs of pregnancy.
Though Hargreaves tried to adopt all of them, he was only able to procure 7, and these became known as the Umbrella Academy. Now, though this is never confirmed, it is possible that Hargreaves was actually the cause behind the pregnancies.
So, there he's heard, and they're inferring that this was the cause behind the pregnancies. Let's keep watching here.
And that due to his experiments on simians, he was able to manufacture children with great gifts. This has never been confirmed, but it's just a theory I've had since we found out that he was an alien in the comic books.
So, it appears as though he just said that because of these experiments on monkeys, this is how he was able to birth in this super race of children. Now, to me, this has polio all over it. Let's play the rest of this out, and then we'll talk about the original polio smack scene.
He wished to use the group to avert the apocalypse, but due to his treatment of them, they left the academy, all except for Luther, who carried out a mission to the moon, though this eventually turned out to be pretty pointless. Now, Hargreaves committed...
So, let's get into this whole polio aspect to all of this. Now, simian means monkey, as you just heard, and the original polio smack scene was cultured in monkeys. And this caused all kinds of problems. It caused all kinds of problems when simian flu infected the smack scenes. Many people developed life-threatening diseases. Now, this is all public history, as you can see here. But doesn't all of this remind you of the Planet of the Apes? Let's read about smack scene contamination of the polio smack scene. Smack scene contaminated with simian virus, known as SV40, occurred in the U.S. and other countries between 1955 and 1961. SV40 is a monkey virus that has a potential to cause cancer in animals and humans, although this is considered very unlikely. There have been no known human cases. Well, according to them, there have been no known human cases. We know how that works. How can you make the connection? You can't, unless somebody admits there's a connection, right? Soon after its discovery, SV40 was identified in early batches of the oral form of the polio smack scene. The smack scene in which SV40 was found were produced between 55 and 61. The contamination may have been in the original seed strain or in the substrate, primary kidney cells from infected monkeys that were used to grow the smack scene. Yes, they grew the polio smack scene inside of the monkeys. Both the Sabin smack scene and the Salk smack scene were affected. Technique used to inactivate the polio virus in the Salk smack scene by means of formaldehyde did not reliably kill SV40. Contaminated smack scene continued to be distributed in the public through 1963. Uh-oh. We losing sound here? I'm going to unplug this headphone here to make sure we don't lose sound. I'm going to get feedback on this headphone. Let me make sure you guys are with me and we'll keep going with this. Alright, this you guys. Here, but sometimes it... I don't see any sound. You guys probably did this polio smack scene. Because according to them, nobody died from it. Nobody got cancer. But, believe it or not, if you look back in the history books, there are many papers and studies saying that people were affected by this. It was difficult to detect small quantities of virus until the advent of polymerase chain reaction. Since then, stored smack scene samples of the after 1962 have been tested negative for SV40. So, this is what's going on. This is history. Okay? Now, let's back up a little bit here. Because In fact, there is a talking of a chimp in the Umbrella Academy, as you just saw in the last few moments of this. They show a chimp here. The chimp's name is Pogo, and he's actually developed by the Doctor. Doctor actually develops this chimp, and the chimp has the ability to speak. Let me show you the image of Pogo the chimp. There he is right here, holding the umbrella at the Umbrella Academy. So, there's Planet of the Apes overtones, aren't they? Now, all of this brings us to Washington, D.C. in the Lincoln Memorial, as you see right here, which of course features prominently in the Planet of the Apes film. This is the Lincoln Memorial right here, and this features prominently in the Planet of the Apes film when the timeline is rewritten, and the Lincoln Memorial and Lincoln himself has the face of an ape instead of the president. Now here's where things get spooky, because the Civil War was a peculiar time in history, because it was at that time that the hypodermic needle was invented. Let's look it up here. I think it's actually in this study here. Sorry, guys. As you can see here, let's back this up. This is History Collection. Civil War physicians might not have known about antiseptic practices to prevent infections. However, thanks to the recent invention of the hypodermic needle, coupled with the discovery of morphine decades earlier, they could at least do something to ease the pain of wounded soldiers. When hypodermic needles and morphine were not available, opium pills were in plentiful supply, at least in Union hospitals. So, this is when specifically hollow needles were invented. Syringes had been around, but hollow needles was the invention that allowed these soldiers to become addicts. In fact, these addicts were readily identifiable by a small bag dangling from a leather thong around their neck containing morphine in tablets and hypo needles. And they estimate that 400,000 Civil War people became addicts because of their wartime experiences. Something here, isn't there? Absolutely. Now, what else is going on here? Well, let's go back and let me play for you what I found in Washington, D.C. The hypodermic needle emerges, look at this, emerges out of the landscape supernaturally and spiritually. It was always about the hypodermic needle, wasn't it? This is the Capitol building here. And it points through the mall, the Capitol Mall. Remember Fill the Mall? Remember the video we did? We live streamed that whole concert, and it was one big ritual. And then the point of the needle being the Washington Monument. And the entire thing terminates with the Lincoln Memorial at the tip of the needle. The pit is the tip. And this is when the hollow needle was invented, right before the Civil War, to inject the soldiers who were dying and their limbs were blown off. And those who survived became addicts. The very scene out of Planet of the Apes with the monkey-faced Lincoln. You guys, something happened during that time. Something happened during that time. It was the beginning of the modern era of jabbing people with needles, wasn't it? I believe that it was. Unbelievable. So let's keep going here because there's even more to this. Now, we know that the name syringe is derived from syrinx, don't we? Let's go back to that. Syringe is derived from syrinx. Who is syrinx? She was the Artemis nymph who was turned into hollow reeds. And later, she was used for Pan's pipes. Pan took the hollow reeds and turned them into his pipes. And in fact, Pan's pipes are called syringe or syrinx. Now, this whole thing was immortalized in a song called The Temples of the Syrinx by the band Rush. Here it is right here. Here's one cover. I believe this is from the Temple of the Syrinx. It was on this album, 2112. Many of you remember that. There are very damaging lines as well in the lyrics of this song. Here's one of the singles album covers. This almost looks like the Slim Tower, doesn't it? Almost. The Temples of the Syrinx. This is a very long time ago, but yet you see all the symbolism. Now, I know we're jumping around a little bit, but this is the simian flu spamdemic. This was actually the cause of the Planet of the Apes. Basically, the apes learned to talk, and then man devolved into not being able to talk. The simian flu spamdemic was a catastrophic flu outbreak that resulted in the near extinction of humanity and the evolution of all apes on Earth. The spamdemic resulted from drug testing done on Genesis Laboratories, a biotech company that sought to create a cure for Alzheimer's. So, this actually really happened in real life. Of course, the Planet of the Apes films came after this contamination of the polio vaccine, but as you can tell, the storyline is probably based on that. So, here's the story. He tested it on a female chimpanzee named Bright Eyes. Lucifer? Bright Eyes? Bright Eyes gained heightened intelligence in the process, but went on a rampage, believing her newborn child would be threatened by her captives. Bright Eyes unfortunately was executed shortly after the attack. Will, has to be Will, right? Feeling sorry for her, abandoned newborn son, adopted the baby chimp, and called him Caesar, after his father. Quoted Julius Caesar. Caesar was shown to have inherited heightened intelligence from his mother, and proved to be smarter than his human counterparts. When Will tested the ALZ-112 on his father seemed to have improved, but his dementia returned after his immune system fought off the ALZ-112. Meanwhile, Will managed to produce an entirely new potential cure called ALZ-113. This cure gave apes an even higher and greater sense of intelligence, and due to this fact, Will attempted to test 113 on his father, but Charles refused and died soon after. Will discovered that 113 had been recklessly being tested on other chimps, ordered by his boss, Stephen Jacobs, ignoring Will's warnings about the risks he is taking. So, there's a whole storyline behind this. We're not going to read all this, but suffice it to say, there's something here, isn't there? Whoa, they talk about What? I didn't read this part. Belarus and Yugoslavia? Wow. Very close to where everything is happening right now in the world. Mentions of biolabs and everything. Interesting. Wow. NATO? Are you kidding me? Let's zoom this out. We might need to read through this part. Spread. Okay, so you guys, this is happening right now. After Caesar and the apes escaped into the Muir Woods, Hunsaker, who had his finger bandaged, arrived to work at San Francisco airport. It was shown that Hunsaker was dripping blood from his nose. A day after Monkeygate, the confirmed deaths of 8 people from the virus in San Francisco prompted the CDC and the WHO to declare a medical emergency and implement quarantine procedures. The U.S. Secretary of Health gave a public speech. Those who with a fever or sore throat should stay home. Hospitals and emergency rooms soon became flooded with patients who were showing signs of the 113, which was dubbed the simian flu. Less than a week later, the nationwide death toll reached 250,000, with no sign of a cure. San Francisco went into chaos, with citizens overwhelming hospitals and looting pharmacies. The breakdown of law and order resulted in the intervention of National Guard and FEMA, and a terrorist group called Alpha Omega. Wow, remember all the Apollo decodes that we did on Alpha and Omega, because Apollo wants to be the Alpha and the Omega. Apollo brings disease and he cures it, doesn't he? According to ancient mythology. Once the connection between the virus and the escaped evolved apes became public knowledge, rioting mobs broke into various zoos and began killing apes. The old world fared no better than the new. Apart from San Francisco, major cities across the globe saw widespread rioting and looting. Containment of the virus was futile, and U.S. President Barack Obama organized evacuation routes. Is this real? This can't be real. In Belarus, an understaffed nuclear power plant went into meltdown. That would be, wow, Wormwood. What? Guys, this is everything we've been talking about. Wow. Chernobyl, Wormwood. While former Yugoslavia, fighting broke out between Serbs and Croats, with similar conflicts being reported among the Israelites and Palestinians in the Levant. Chinese government went on a brutal crackdown of rebelling ethnic minorities in eastern China while fighting broke out. So, the world is a stage, isn't it? By now, NATO and other organizations attempted to control the rioting and anarchy. So, there you go, you guys. All written out. The script has been set for the future. Now, let's do a little bit of summary here. We have chimps. We have a simian flu. We have Lincoln at the memorial. We've got a big needle, which appears to be the center of it all. As you can see here, we have umbrellas. We have human-chimp mutations. Wow. A giant syringe appears in the landscape. Now, we had done 2 other syringe videos. We found a syringe needle. That video is sitting at like 6,000 views, so apparently the word is not getting out. We did a second video called The World's Second Largest Needle, and that was the Space Needle in Seattle. Well, I think this is probably the king of all needles right here, pointing to the precise point in history where the hollow needle was invented and what it would be used for in the Civil War, and that all of this was pointing, literally, pun intended, to the future of what they had in store for us. Continuous poking and jabbing and poking. Now, that's what I found, and I will keep my eyes peeled, of course, about all of this for the future. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Wow, it's been a crazy last 24 hours. We have pipelines blowing up. We have hurricanes battering the coast of Florida. Notice the theme here: water, oceans, flood. And I don't know what the future holds. You know, when we think about the right-left paradigm, and we understand that, you know, the countries are all kind of playing a game with us, and that at the top, they're kind of all on the same side. It doesn't really open the door for some kind of nuclear exchange, does it? When you think about that, unless it has to do with mass sacrifice of all of us, which we've seen that happen before as well, haven't we? During world conflicts and world events. But this whole pipeline thing definitely looks like it was done by us. And so the logical response, if you're thinking in terms of the world stage, would be for Russia to retaliate, right? So all I'm saying is be prepared, okay? Be prepared. Just make sure that you have everything you need, a couple months supply of food. And I'm not telling you this to scare you. I'm telling you this because things have shifted, haven't they? Things have shifted. Now, we do have some subscribers who live in Florida, and apparently you guys are, I guess, are okay. You have power. Rachel's in the chat. She's in Florida. She has power. So things weren't as bad as we originally thought in some of the areas of Florida. I don't know about all of Florida. There are lots of pictures of flooding and things like that. But Rachel is here. She has power. She's got internet, of course. And so at least the area that she was in is okay. But as we begin to transition into this post-COVID world, I suspect that things will shift. Now, I have a show scheduled for tomorrow. I was just thinking about how right after Blind 11, they were telling people not to wear masks. And then 19 years later, they were forcing people to wear masks. And there's something about that we'll get into tomorrow. I still have to do some research on that and find out how all of this fits together. But there's something about the masks, isn't there? And the breath of death instead of the breath of life. That will be tomorrow's show. Thanks, Mac, for joining the channel membership. Now, today we're going to get into Lincoln. And Lincoln really was the first hypodermic needle president. We'll get into that. He was also the first possessed president and the first copper telegraph line president. We'll be breaking all that down today. And we're also going to be talking about how the dark pool is infecting humanity as we speak. Speaking of large bodies of water and oceans and the whole water theme, it's coming around full circle. And all of it's happening through the tip of a needle. It's the dark DNA. Now, our journey begins today with the story of a man of color dying in a dark pool. Now, this is all spiritually symbolic. In this case, he died of Legionnaire's disease in an Airbnb hot tub in New Zealand. Let's read this. A New Zealand woman is gearing up to sue Airbnb following the death of her husband. Sandra Birmingham, 54, was visiting Gozo, Malta. Her family in 2016 when her husband Paul became sick after using the hot tub in their Airbnb rental. Paul died a few days after returning home from the Christmas holiday from Legionnaire's disease. Birmingham is now fighting against the VRU community. She believes the contaminated hot tub was the culprit that took her husband's life, suing for $1.3 million. I do not believe the jacuzzi had been properly maintained, and it had not been used for some time before our arrival. Birmingham has engaged in a 6-year-long legal battle with Airbnb since her husband's death in 2016. because it was contaminated with bacteria that led to her husband's demise. Paul only went in the hot tub once on New Year's Eve, and he was in the water for just seconds. The bacteria is airborne, and I believe he was infected soon after he checked into the farmhouse. Medical professionals determined Paul died as a result of Legionnaire pneumonia. Notice the theme here. Not being able to breathe. The dark pool. Dark waters. Possession. The word pneumonia actually means spirit. It's the spirit entering the body, is what this is really all about on a spiritual level. So, I thought I would open today's show with this very telling story about how all of this works. Now, here's where things get really weird. Because yesterday, one of you asked me to look at this film called Hot Tub Time Machine. Many of you will remember this film. It released in 2010. And it was about a group of people that travel back in time inside of a hot tub. Dark waters. Now, how does all this fit in? Well, how they ended up traveling back in time was because a particular energy drink was spilled on the controls for the hot tub. This is it right here. It was called Chernobyl. And here we have the Russian component to this, don't we? Chernobyl. Now, we had covered Chernobyl in that event. What that was about. Here's some screenshots. There's the energy drink here. This is them sitting in the hot tub. And here's another image here of the energy drink actually spilling into the control panel. There you go there. And of course, something else. If you look at the actual logo on the real drink, it has a portal, a cube, or a hexagon, which just so happens to match pretty much exactly what's on Trump's coat of arms. I'm going to zoom this image up here. The hand holding the lightning bolt coming out of a cube. And then I'm going to go over here and look at the top of Trump's coat of arms. A hand holding an arrow, which is synonymous with the lightning bolt, and coming out of a square or cube. So here we have yet another time travel connection between Trump and a time travel movie. Now, let's go back to Hot Tub Time Machine and look at the plot here. I didn't capture screenshots of this movie yet. I'd actually watched it before, but it wasn't until today or yesterday that I realized the connection between the Trump coat of arms and the energy drink in the movie that spills on the hot tub, causing them to go through time. Now, what's this plot all about? Let me go back and make sure you guys are with me, and we will keep going with the plot of Hot Tub Time Machine. Then we'll get into Lincoln a little bit later in the show. Now, this is crazy. So, look at the dates that they travel back to in time. Let's go up here. Where'd it go? The dates that they travel back to is 1986. We're going to look at some footage of Trump in 1986, and you're going to be blown away at what was revealed. Of course, they have to find their way back from 1986 to 2010. How old was Trump in 1986? He was 40 years old. In 2010, he was 64, which is the reverse of 46, the year he was born, 1946. So, I decided to go back to the future, as they say, and find footage of Trump from 1986 to see what he was up to. And watch this as the Matrix reveals the truth about all of this. Watch and listen.
Nice view, huh? Look at that. Yeah, yeah. That's the Lincoln Memorial over there. Yeah. Right over there. See the
talking about describing the Twin Towers as Lincoln and his wife. Now, this is the show in which he enters Trump Tower with some guests. And they're standing at the Empire State Building. Now, if you don't remember, right after 9/11, Trump was interviewed. And he said that when the towers fell, that they were the tallest buildings in the world. And he said before that, 40 Wall Street was the tallest building in the world. And now that the towers had fallen, 40 Wall Street was now the tallest building in the world. These were his comments, pumping up his 40 Wall Street building moments after thousands of people died. Sociopathic comment. Nobody would say something like that. Look how tall this guy is. Wow. Ooh. Look at this. Look how tall this guy is. He almost hits the top of the covering there. Look how much taller he is than these people. Let's keep watching this. This is crazy. And this couple on a tour of New York, and he shows them Lincoln, what he calls Lincoln and his wife as the Twin Towers. Now, remember that, because when we get into Lincoln, this is all going to connect together.
That's Lincoln and his wife.
So here they enter Trump Tower. Wow, and I just got deja vu right now. Whoa.
Tower? A little. You just heard of it?
Now, even though what you're looking at is not fully made out of copper, a lot of it is like marble and stuff like this inside of Trump Tower's lobby, but it has a very copper, referencing a 60 Minutes episode that basically did not have good things to say about Trump, something about him kicking people out of their homes. And this couple that Letterman has picked up off the street to come on a tour of New York doesn't have a very good picture of Trump in terms of their opinion about him. That fox fur coat, Fox, of course, is 66 or 666, but that alone doesn't prove anything. But it's interesting that that's the one of the few items that they talk about, and they talk about killing the fox and how to kill the fox.
Thank you very much. Go on in.
Then they enter Trump's office. I don't know which floor his actual office is on, but we do know that his penthouse is on that kind of explains the long-standing relationship that he has with a particular country. And there you see the tree in front of it. Let's keep watching here. Front and center in his office, just above his 1986 but a news broadcast. This one about Mar-a-Lago. Again, 1986. We're traveling back in time.
Talking about this fancy mansion in Palm Beach for some time.
That is true. It's incredible.
We're finally going to hear about it now. Coming up next, a tour of a remarkable mansion. It is the full house of Donald Trump.
The time now, 38 minutes past the hour.
38 minutes past the hour. Of course, 38 is 19 times 2. Let's keep watching. They come back from the commercial break.
It's now 19 minutes before the hour.
And then it's 19 minutes before the hour. Notice all the 19s.
Well, back in 1927, Marjorie Merriweather Post, one of the richest and most famous women of the day, built a house in Palm Beach, Florida.
So they're talking about the lady who actually built Mar-a-Lago, and she's actually, let's see here. Oh, here she is here. This is her right here. And what I want you to notice next are the numerical synchronicities with her life and death. She died one day after 9/11 in 1973, which is the year that it opened. It opened on April 4th, 1973, and she was age 86 at her death. And I want you to keep watching because there are some pretty profound numerical synchronicities. Remember, she died at 86, and this is a 1986 interview that Trump granted to Mar-a-Lago. So he was obviously sending a message about the future collapse of the towers.
But not just any house. It has 118 rooms.
100 plus 6 plus 6 plus 6 rooms.
Half of them bedrooms. 33 bathrooms.
33 bathrooms. As well as Trump Tower also has 33 rooms. I think it was bathrooms. No, wait, what is it? Oh, it's 33,000 square feet of office space in Trump Tower.
A theater, and just in case, 3 bomb shelters. During the 70s, the federal government held it as a presidential retreat, but gave it back because it couldn't afford the $1 million a year upkeep. Well, the house is Mar-a-Lago. Now, if the government couldn't afford it, you might wonder who could. Meet Donald Trump, real estate man and multi-millionaire.
That's right. This is the great entrance hall to Mar-a-Lago. The tiles are from 1400, and they're ancient Spanish tiles, and throughout the house they...
So 1400, of course, 7 and 7, that's his number.
They have 36,000 of these tiles.
36,000 tiles, which is 6 times 6.
Tiles. They're each in themselves a work of art, and it's a very special entryway, as you can see.
So you walk in here and people start gasping just about at this point, right?
Well, they are very, they're amazed at what they see, as I was when I first walked in and as you were.
When you first walked through that door, the first time you walked into this house, what did you think?
I couldn't really believe it. This was one of the great treasures of the world. It's considered the #1 home far and away in America, and I personally just couldn't believe it.
And when you see it, you believe it. The ceiling glistens with 1,000 gold leaf wings. Bristol crystal chandeliers light the 60-foot-long living room.
1,000 gold leaf wings, like 1,000 points of light. And then she mentions a number 17, and you'll hear this number repeated twice, which of course is the alphanumeric equivalent to the letter Q.
7 antique silk tapestries adorn the walls, and the huge stone Italian Gothic fireplace still works.
I have not used it, no. I have not. I'm concerned about using it. I don't want any smoke in the room, to be perfectly honest. In fact, if you notice, we have Mrs. Post's picture right alongside of my wife's picture with town and...
So he puts Ivana's picture next to Mrs. Post. Post died in 73, and Ivana died at 73 years old. Twin pictures, Twin Towers. Twin Towers opened in 1973.
Country. Mm-hmm. So we really pay a certain reverence to Mrs. Post and what she was able to create, because she created
the wizard.
A magical house. It's a fantasy house.
But are you going to change this room at all? I mean,
no.
You're not going to do anything?
No.
No personal Trump touches here?
No. Believe it or not, no.
That's right. Everything is going to stay exactly the way Mrs. Post would have had it.
So the Mar-a-Lago hotel or whatever estate is frozen in time. Nothing has been changed.
This is the dining room. How many does it seat?
Well, I guess it seats as many as you want. It just, I really couldn't even tell you. It seats from anywhere from 2 to probably 50 or 60 people, depending on the way you set it up.
And setting it up is an art in itself. Mrs. Post left 17 sets of china in the
There's the number 17 again. 17 sets of china. Q.
House. That means the Trumps can entertain 36 of their friends.
They can entertain 6 times 6 friends.
For 19 straight nights. And
19 straight nights is the number 19 again. Third time in this show.
Never use the same set twice. Now that's a lot of China.
That's a lot of China. Are you awake now? China was coming all along, wasn't it? COVID-19.
She has a house that
Use the same set twice. Now that's a lot of China.
She has a house that slept 56. It has 56 bedrooms.
Now, Trump did increase the amount of bedrooms at Mar-a-Lago to 58 bedrooms. It's no longer 56, which the 58 bedrooms would match Trump Tower, which is 58 stories tall. Now, you're probably asking, how can it be 58 stories tall and his penthouse be on the 66th floor? Well, that's how he numbered the floors.
And each person that would come as a guest would have their own car and driver. They'd each have a Rolls Royce, the room, the driver, the maid, their own cook. She lived a style that nobody's lived in this country. Nobody in this country has ever lived that style.
Now these glasses, they're light, they're all actually hand-painted?
Yes, all hand-painted, Venetian, and truly magnificent, and not produced. You couldn't get glass like this today.
Now, I know you've already eaten in this room. You've actually had a dinner party. When you sit in here with people all around this table and you eat off of this gold and these are lit, and you sit in this room, what do you think?
I say, what am I doing here? How did this happen?
As a matter of fact, that's precisely what a lot of other people would like an 18-room mansion.
So basically, they go on to describe the real estate deal. Apparently, he got this Mar-a-Lago at half price just a few years before this interview took place.
Was nowhere near that price.
That if you use the number that you're using, you probably wouldn't be too far off.
The rest of the deal reportedly includes $3 million for the mansion's furniture and $2 million for the beach. An incredible deal.
I've been all over the world, and I've seen the great thing in the world, not only in this country, but in the world that's comparable to Mar-a-Lago.
You've left it exactly the way she had it?
Exactly.
There's something that's interesting to me is this little thing here on her door. And you pull this little thing down, and it says, "Do not disturb."
And what it really says is, Dawn, Organization Trump, disturb the resting.
Disturb resting.
That's correct. That's from a different age.
So people who are somewhat concerned that
That's from a different age. There's another time travel reference.
they'll start having tour buses come through here, that Mr. and Mrs. Trump will turn this into a real tourist attraction, you can rest their fears?
I can rest their fears. I mean, they were also concerned that I was going to turn the house into a great hotel casino, and I have no intention of doing anything like that.
So on winter weekends, Donald Trump says you will find him here, entertaining friends and family with a staff of 25, safely protected by a security force of 30. At the young age of 39, Donald Trump has found his castle. Lucky Donald Trump, and I must say he was very kind, because I think he originally thought this tour would take something like 15-20 minutes, and as you could tell, those rooms are gigantic, and we must thank the lighting people that came along and lit this house beautifully, and it took him several hours to take us through. So he said that's the first time he'll do it and the last.
So we just saw it. Now, Mar-a-Lago is the name of it. That is a 1920s film star.
I don't know. It means from sea to ocean. And it's Mar-a-Lago. Yeah, translation.
All right. Coming up next, we're going to take you to a Florida tennis camp where they train you for mind games as well as for good
mind games. So, as you can see, looking back in time, the Matrix reveals itself for what it is, doesn't it? Now, I looked everywhere for this supposed 1920s film star named Mar-a-Lago, and I could not find her anywhere. So she's been disappeared from the history books for one reason or another. Maybe too much was revealed, and they had to erase that fraction of history. Let me go back into the chat, and we're going to get into Lincoln and how that connects to the hot tub time machine as well. So make sure you guys are with me, and we'll keep going with this. Now, next we're going to talk about another dark pool. the tidal basin of Washington, D.C. Here it is right here. Dark pool, dark waters. Now, what is this about? Well, obviously, you see to the left of this the outline of Washington, D.C. from the Capitol building through the White House lawn, the mall. All I did was outline this down to the Washington Monument and here to the Lincoln Memorial. And what you have is a giant hypodermic needle. Now, how could this be? How could there be the outline of a hypodermic needle in the Washington, D.C. landscape? And why is it pointing to Abraham Lincoln's memorial? And why does it have the dark pool next to it? Well, the dark pool is the fallen angel DNA. It's what's in the needle, is what it is. Now, we did a video also exposing that the needle is bruising the woman in the heel. You can make it out here. As the heel comes around the Washington Monument, which is the obelisk, and we actually outlined what appeared to be a foot right here in the landscape. You can't see it here because of the angle, but imagine here's the ankle coming down. Here's the heel of the woman. Remember, the Bible says that this serpent will bruise her in the heel. And here you see the arch of the foot here, and then the toe becomes Lincoln Memorial, is the toe. Now, you can go back and look at that video. I just did it like last week if you're unsure about this or you think I'm stretching things. So in effect, these people know that the Bible is real. They know Jesus is coming back. They know that the prophecies are real. They built it right into their landscape. Now, what happened to Abraham Lincoln? Well, he was turned into an ape, wasn't he? In the planet of the apes. This happened after he was possessed. Possession. The timeline changed. Abraham Lincoln turned into an ape. So instead of Abe, A-B-E, the B got flipped around and turned into a P, turning him into an ape. So what is this about? Well, this is regression. This is zombie-like behavior. Just like in the movie Nope, when the ape eats the people on the television set. Because it's all connected. And it all happened in Planet of the Apes through the tip of a needle. Remember, they were experimenting with a cure for some disease. They injected these apes, which then had the ability to speak, and then the humans lost the ability to speak. And that's what happened in Planet of the Apes. So now you're starting to see the big picture, so to speak. You're seeing the Planet of the Apes storyline right here laid out in the capital of the United States. The tip of the needle, Lincoln, the tidal basin, the dark pool, the infection, and everything else. Now let's keep going with this because there's so much more. So, how else do we know that Abraham Lincoln is connected to the needle? Well, other than the fact that the needle is pointing right at him, under his presidency, the hypodermic needle was invented. This is from history.com. And they talk all about how during the Civil War, the hypodermic needle was invented. Why? Well, it was invented and used on the widest scale ever to treat Union soldiers with opium to treat them for their injuries. So in effect, the first opioid crisis happened under Lincoln. And it's no mistake that all of this is happening again right now in modern times, this opioid crisis. Let's read this article. During the Civil War, military hospitals considered opioids to be essential medicine. Doctors and nurses used opium and morphine to treat soldiers' pain, stop internal bleeding, and mitigate vomiting and diarrhea caused by infectious diseases. However, this led to some soldiers to develop opioid addictions, either during the war or afterwards, when they sought medical treatment for wartime injuries or illnesses. For many Civil War veterans, opioid addictions were life-ruining. Veterans' dependency made them fatigued and emaciated and could lead to a fatal overdose. In some cases, opioid addiction could threaten a veteran's ability to receive a pension. In 1895, a Union veteran named Charles Williams stated in an application to a soldier's home that he was totally unable to earn a living since he had contracted the opium habit during the war. By the time Williams applied to the soldier's home, the scope of the problem had grown beyond veterans. America was in the midst of its first major opioid crisis, fueled by the rise of injectable morphine that some doctors had begun administering during the Civil War. The specific plight of veterans helped draw attention to the issue, raising awareness among doctors and the general public. Opioid use has a long history in the U.S. Before the Civil War, doctors commonly prescribed opium pills and laudanum, which was a mixture of opium and alcohol. These opiates were available in many drugstores without a prescription. When the war began, both the Union and the Confederacy considered it important to stock their hospitals with drugs. In addition to opium and laudanum, some Union doctors also started using the hypodermic syringe, a relatively new invention, to inject another opioid, morphine, straight into the soldier's veins. These were the advents of the use of the hypodermic needle. Wow. Now, I'll put links to all this, so I'm not going to read through all of these articles, but this proves the connection between the needle pointing at Lincoln's memorial and the one outlined in the landscape. Now, let's get into some other aspects of Abraham Lincoln, because, as we all know, he was assassinated in 1865, or so we're told. But what you didn't know is that the years leading up to his death, a very interesting and major multi-million-dollar, and in today's standards, billion-dollar project was happening in plain sight. A project that didn't make any kind of sense. The telegraph cable. More specifically, the transatlantic telegraph cable. Now, why did this cable not make sense? Well, it wasn't too many decades before this that America had gained independence from Britain and didn't really like Britain all that much. But yet, we were bringing to bear one of the most major projects in the history of the world to connect ourselves to Britain. And I believe we never really were free from Britain. I believe there was an arrangement made, and there were infiltrators who immediately entered into high levels of U.S. government and basically retied the knot between America and England. We never really were free, and this is where we get taxation and all these other things that were never part of the original plan for this country. You know, Social Security and all these other things that weren't in the Constitution, but yet we have today. Still slaves to the beast. Now, here's another thing. The telegraph was an integral process that was relied upon to win the Civil War. In fact, Lincoln spent most of his time in his telegraph room. Now, I found this article, this historical article, talking about all this. We're going to read through some of this. The importance of the telegraph in the U.S. Civil War, Part 3. The Union's use of the telegraph. Now, let's read this, and then we'll talk about what all this means. Scroll down here. Look at that. There's a guy on top of a telegraph pole in this picture here. That's what it appears to be going on there to get the signal. President Lincoln in the telegraph office. As an early adopter of the telegraph, Lincoln realized the importance of building a strong telegraphic infrastructure within the government and the military. Now, history does not tell us that there was a direct connection between Lincoln and building the transatlantic telegraph cable, but it happened right under his presidency. So you had to ask yourself, why doesn't history talk about his involvement in it? Obviously, he was the president of the United States. So this was a huge project. Where is the historical documentation about why this telegraph line was built, his involvement in it, and everything else? And to me, it almost seems like a massive cover-up. And now let's keep reading here. Lincoln realized the importance of building a strong telegraphic infrastructure within the government and the military. With the Union facing the prospect of a 1,000-mile battlefront, the telegraph gave Lincoln an unprecedented ability to converse with his military leaders in the field as though he were in the tent with them, and power to assume the role of commander-in-chief in a more titular sense. Now, we've talked about the fact that the telegraph was the precursor to the telephone, wasn't it? We went from copper telegraph lines to copper telephone lines. We talked about the telephone booth being a sort of time machine. Well, it appears as though Lincoln was already channeling this feeling long before the telephone became common, because he talked about this telegraph as if he had transported himself right to the front lines with his military leaders. Before Lincoln could exercise any degree of control over the nation's dispersed military forces, it was necessary to organize the telegraphic capabilities of the Union. At the start of the Civil War, all government telegraphs passed through one central communications hub. Not even the War Department had its own separate line. The organization of the USMTC soon remedied that deficiency when its headquarters were established inside the War Department. By March of 1862, the telegraph had become so vital to the prosecution of the war that Secretary Stanton moved the USMTC telegraph office into the old library room on the second floor front, adjoining his own quarters. In short order, the telegraph office of the War Department became Lincoln's Situation Room, where the president not only monitored events through incoming messages, but also initiated communications directly to the field. Now think about the ramifications of this. The modern Situation Room was the vintage, basically, telephone booth. Transporting yourself to the battlefront. Lincoln spent more time in the telegraph office than in any other location during his presidency. So, there you have it from the historical records, tying everything we've been researching into one full, complete circle of the bizarre. Now, let's keep going with this, because there's even more. Now, history tells us that there were many attempts made to cross the Atlantic. Many of those attempts happened under Lincoln's presidency. The final attempt happened just after his death. And like I said, it seems like some kind of big cover-up, because nowhere in the historical record do they talk about Lincoln being involved in any way with this. I believe that there was a secret pact that Lincoln had with the monarchy to stay under her control, but to pretend that America had freedom. This is why he fought the South so hard, because they didn't want to fall in line with the new order of the time, which was to establish a federal government that was much more intrusive than the original founding fathers had set out for. And so because Lincoln won, we have the America we have today. So it would make sense that this huge step of completing this telegraph, this huge step, it would be a huge step for the monarchy to be able to exert real-time control of presidents through the telegraph and later the telephone. I mean, why else would they bring all these billions of dollars to bear to communicate with Britain? That makes no sense. After we had just allegedly broke free from her. So, Lincoln had an obsession with the copper telegraph line, didn't he? And this makes all the sense in the world as to why they put him on the copper penny, which used to be solid copper and now is copper plated. Now, why did they change the penny from solid copper to copper pennies? Well, I have an idea as to why they did that. Come back into the chat with you guys. The American coins, the coinage of America, are all full of copper, aren't they? And we talked about that. And basically what it was a bank in plain sight. It was the hoarding of copper in circulation in plain sight so that it could later be pulled out of circulation and used for the 5G base stations, which require a lot of copper. What better way to mine all the copper that you can out of the earth, put it into circulation so that you could later pull it out at your whim to use it to build the infrastructure for the next prison of the future, which is 5G and 6G technology. And this is why they changed the penny from being solid copper to only copper coating. Let me see who can get the answer. Now, this requires, as they like to say, 5D chess thinking. Why would they take the copper out of a penny and only coat it in copper if they knew they were going to use the copper from all the other coins to basically build the 5G network? Somebody will get this one because you guys are smart. Why would they take the copper out of the pennies, you guys? Someone will get it. I'm going to wait until you guys get it. I might give you a clue. Marcy says to fool you. Yeah, it's definitely a trick. Why would they pull the copper out of the pennies and make them only a coating of copper? Let's see. Pennies are cheap and get lost. Yes, Brooke nailed it. Nobody keeps pennies anymore, do they? Pennies get thrown on the ground. Nobody even takes the time to stop and pick a penny up. So they become lost copper, don't they? They become orphaned copper, which is not easy to find. People don't even throw copper pennies into wishing wells anymore. Why do you think they came up with wishing wells? To collect as much of the copper pennies as they could, right? So, by taking the copper out of the pennies, they don't have to worry about losing that copper. Now you're starting to understand what's really happening. This has been a plan for decades and decades and decades and decades. Yes, Sharon, people don't care about pennies. So they get thrown, they get lost in wherever, cracks in the bottoms of cars, whatever. Now, Lincoln was the first possessed president. How do I know this? Well, history admits that he and his wife held seances right in the White House. And I believe this is the first time the demonic spirit entered the president. Now, those of you who ice fish, what do you use to drill through the ice? Let's see who gets it. See how many fishermen there are out there. What do you use to drill through the ice if you're a fisherman? What is the technical name for it? Oops. So you get it first. Let me zoom this up correctly. Okay. Ice auger. Thank you, Gub15. So, is it a mistake that the spiral auger is in the word inaugurate, which means to drill something into something else, to possess through a portal? I don't think that's an accident. Inaugurate. Use a spiral portal to insert something into something else. Make it an empty vessel to be filled with something else. So, that's about all I had today. Again, we'll be back on tomorrow with Mask Off, Mask On. Remember, after the buildings fell, they said, don't wear a mask, don't wear a mask, everything's fine. 19 years later, they say you have to wear a mask. We're going to look at the bizarre juxtaposition of those two events and the whole mask ritual and not being able to breathe. And there's something to that on a spiritual level. Let's go.